Chapter 712. What's wrong, Jingrong? Do you know Bogeo? Jiang Pingji could tell that there was something fishy going on between them. She felt that the atmosphere was not awkward enough, so she fanned the flames. Yang Si looked down and said, Chief Huang, you've mistaken me for someone else. My surname is Yang, and my first name is Si. It was indeed Yang Si. The smile on Huang Song's face seemed to be brighter, but the anger in his chest was quietly ignited. So it's Master Yang Si. Feng Ju secretly frowned and asked, Are you working under Lanting now? Yang Si replied, Yes. The atmosphere became even more awkward. I missed the opportunity to meet you back then, and I regret it to this day. Now that I know that you have a home to return to, I can finally put my mind at ease. Huang Song's words were both provocative and provocative. Yang Si refused to show weakness. Fate has been decided. I hope Chief Huang won't worry about it. However, fate is really hard to say. If I hadn't seen Chief Huang in the tent today, I wouldn't have known that you and my lord are such good friends. May I ask, has the county chief changed the gatekeeper to this day? If the gatekeeper hadn't used his power to suppress the visiting card, Yang Si wouldn't have waited for 3 days. Only a fool would continue to stay and wait for others if there was no reply in 3 days. Yang Si's reply made Huang Song even angrier. Jiang Pingji looked at the two of them and said to Huang Song, Bogeo, look at what you're saying. You're like a resentful wife who was cheated on by a scumbag. Yang Si taunted, and Jiang Pingji stabbed him with a knife, dealing a beautiful critical hit. Huang Song recalled what he had just said, and his expression darkened. He gradually looked like the bottom of a pot. Yang Si explained with a smile, smoothing things over. My lord, you've wronged me. If someone was cheated on, it shouldn't be Chief Huang. Oh. Jiang Pingji put on an expression, as if she was listening to gossip. Yang Si told the story of the past to the point. These words were not only for Jiang Pingji, but also for Huang Song. Yang Si didn't want to rely on Jiang Pingji at first. He just wanted to meet Wei Ci and collect his debt. He didn't expect Jiang Pingji to be overbearing and use both carrot and stick. Yang Si fell into the trap. There were many details that he didn't go into, but the listeners could imagine the scene in their minds, which made them unable to restrain their laughter. Huang Song's complexion improved as a result, and his anger gradually subsided. Huang Song was angry, not for anything else, but simply because Yang Si had thrown himself into Jiang Pingji's arms after dumping him. He was originally a sensitive and suspicious person. Because of Yang Si's matter, he had been brooding over it for many years. Coupled with Yang Si's sarcasm, how could he not be angry? Now that it was out in the open, he accepted it calmly. If he didn't accept it, would he have to break off relations with Lu Shi because of Yang Si? Or to make Lu Shi and Yang Si alienate each other for his sake? Huang Song felt that his relationship with Lu Shi wasn't that strong yet, so he didn't want to embarrass himself. The meeting was to be held at dusk, and the venue was to be provided by Su Bei. Because of the short distance, Jiang Pingji, Lu Shi, and Huang Song set off together and arrived together. Although they were father and son, Jiang Pingji and Lu Shi's forces were counted separately. Each of them was considered a force. Including Jiang Pingji, there were a total of 23 allied troops. Jiang Pingji had only arrived for 2 days, and the 2 days had been very exciting. Of course, she had no time to get to know the other forces. Each force had at least 10,000 soldiers, and at most 50,000 soldiers. Other than these large forces, there were also many small forces with only a few thousand soldiers. They formed small groups, and they could also occupy a place and have a little say. As the organizer, Su Bei sat at the head of the table. Other than the head of the table, the seat on the lower right was the most honorable. There was already a middle-aged man in a vermilion robe sitting there. Needless to say, he was the chief of Shanghai County Wumashang. Seeing the situation, Lu Shi chuckled and sat down on the lower left without a care. Jiang Pingji followed him and sat down next to him. Since ancient times, the right was the most honorable. The seat on the right was always slightly more honorable than the corresponding seat on the left. Jiang Pingji sat next to Lu Shi, and the second seat on the right was empty. Su Fei sat there unceremoniously. The meeting had not yet begun, but the scene was already filled with the smell of gunpowder. This time, Jiang Pingji did not bring Feng Zhen and Yang Si. Instead, she brought Li Yin and Dian Yan. The meeting was a place that required brains, but it was also a place that required fists. If they could not come to an agreement through words, they could directly fight. Li Yin sat in the second row and quietly looked around. He lowered his voice and said, "My lord, there are so many people." The venue of the meeting was extremely large. The decorations around it did not seem like a simple campsite, but more like a luxurious palace. The flat ground was covered with a layer of pure animal skin. Even if one stepped on it barefoot, one would not feel the slightest bit cold. There were several bronze lamps in the shape of Chang, flying in the sky, court ladies washing their clothes, and 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. The lamp oil was filled with expensive spices. After burning, it caused the air to be filled with a strange fragrance. The inside of the tent was very bright, as if it was daytime. Everything reflected one word: rich. There are indeed a lot of people. Li Yin still dared to look around, but Dian Yin sat upright and still, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. He clenched his fists and placed them on his knees. His eyes were wide open as he stared straight ahead. Dian Yin looked fierce and fierce. He had a tan face and a muscular body. When he put on such an appearance, the people opposite him almost jumped in fright. Opposite him, Su Fei was speechless. The process of the meeting was nothing more than the following: eat, drink, watch the dance. After 3 rounds of drinking, they would talk about business. If business was settled and everyone was happy, then they would continue serving food, eating, drinking, and watching the dance. If they had good luck with the ladies, they might even be able to take 1 or 2 dancers and go back for a night of pleasure. However, news had just spread that Jiang Pingji was almost assassinated by a dancer. The feudal lords probably did not dare to risk their lives. If business could not be settled, they would either continue to quarrel or leave on bad terms. No matter what the outcome was, it had nothing to do with Jiang Pingji. She and Lu Shi were just there to be bystanders. When the live stream started, 150,000 viewers instantly flooded in. 1,000 deaths are not like a moonlight. What's the situation now? It feels like the meeting is very leisurely. Yesterday was a banquet, and today is still a banquet? Kneeling for monthly tickets. That's not right. There are so many people today. Their attractiveness levels are different. I'd better continue sucking up to little brother Li Yin. Kneeling for recommendation tickets. Surprise! The streamers summoned beasts today are not Feng Zhen or Yang Si. What's the point of not bringing along long-range sorcerers? Popular all over the world doll. Although she didn't bring along the sorcerers, the streamer brought along 2 violent combat types. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Why did it feel like the style of all the bullet screens had changed after not starting the live stream for a few hours? Unbeknownst to her, there was a studio in the live stream that had imitated other games and made a mobile game for entertainment. Simply put, it was a game where players created characters, chose different lords, and summoned various pets, subordinates. This game studio even imitated a certain mobile game and gave each subordinate different qualities and combat numbers. Because of the popularity of the live stream, the game had just been launched, and the number of downloads was shockingly high currently. The 2 most popular pets were Wei Ci of the sorcerers and Li Yin of the combat types. The reason? Chapter 713. Knowing this, Jiang Pingji could only sigh. They were indeed people who knew how to do business. Host V, help me talk to the game company. If they use our characters to make money, they should at least give us some benefits. For a moment, the entire live broadcast room was filled with hahaha bullet screens. And some people even went to Weibo to comment on that studio. Jiang Pingji chatted passionately with the audience to kill time. The alliance meeting had already begun. As the host, Su Pei gave an impassioned opening speech, stirring up the emotions of the 23 feudal vassals and other idle fish. He encouraged everyone to work together to resist the enemy and expel the traitors. Even if it was a dry and uninteresting speech, when used by Su Bei, he could still make it sound like a deluge of heavenly flowers. Everyone could not help but sigh with admiration at his grasp of rhythm. He was truly a master of rhythm. Everyone responded one after another. They did not swear or swear, but they unanimously expressed their indignation towards Prince Changsho. Jiang Pingji had just finished chatting with the audience when she realized that everyone around her was crusading against Prince Changsho. This made her frown slightly. The alliance meeting to rescue the emperor is not a battle meeting. What's the use of these people scolding Prince Changsho? She shook her head in amusement. Lu Shi, who was nearby, also had a faint smile on his face. He secretly passed her a plate of dried fruits for her to munch on as a snack. Lu Shi couldn't help but laugh. Just watch, don't speak. The spectators should have the qualities of a spectator. They should just watch and not say anything, and let them argue all they want. Su Bei surveyed the crowd, and was extremely satisfied with the rhythm of the battle. However, when his gaze swept over the father and son pair, the corner of his eye twitched strangely. Just as the nature of the alliance meeting was about to change, a clear voice attracted everyone's attention. The person who spoke was Jiang Pingji's old friend, Huang Song. Everyone, please listen to me. Huang Song had brought 15,000 soldiers, and he was a county governor, so his seat among the 23 vassal factions was very close to the front. He stood up from his seat and bowed with cupped fists. Traitors naturally have to be dealt with, but traitors are cunning. Seeing that the alliance has the advantage in numbers, they have been entrenched in their defenses for the past few days. 1 or 2 days is fine, but as time goes on, I'm afraid there will be changes. Someone retorted. What other variables can there be? How can a 400,000 strong army not be able to deal with Prince Changsho? Prince Changsho is a traitor to the country. If we don't kill him, we won't be able to pacify the people. Prince Changsho will definitely be terror-stricken when he hears of this. Why should we be afraid of him? Su Bei raised his hand to suppress the other voices. He asked warmly, why does County Chief Huang say such a thing? Huang Song replied, before the troops and horses move, the provisions and fodder move first. All of you have led your elites into battle, and this is where the alliance meeting will be held. Do you have enough rations? How long could the provisions last? Prince Changsho has Zhangzhou to rely on, and the Ming family of Zhangzhou is in cahoots with him on the outside. He has sufficient troops and rations. If he fortifies the walls and clears the fields, he will not come out and fight us to the death. How long do you think we can last? Since Prince Changsho had the Mangs as his ally, he could afford to drag things out, but the alliance could not. Many people's expressions changed when they heard this. The local tyrants were not afraid of squandering money. Fighting a war was like throwing money away. Some people were short of money and had weak families. They could not afford to fight a long war. Thinking of this, the voice that was clamoring just now suddenly became mute, unable to stifle even half a word. Huang Song smiled and asked another question. Marching to war is not child's play. There are many things to pay attention to when it comes to arranging troops and formations. There are 23 forces present, and each has their own way of fighting. If we face off against Prince Changsho's army, will we fight on our own? Or will we work together? Of course, we will work together and coordinate with each other. If we fight on our own, even if we have 400,000 strong troops, we will still be scattered like sand. Prince Changsho only needs to find the weakest point of the formation, and he can easily break it. Even if the god of war comes, he will be powerless when faced with such scattered sand. At that moment, someone responded to Huang Song. The person who spoke had a gentle and unique voice that was extremely recognizable. Unlike the boldness of the northerners, it was a gentle and affectionate voice that was unique to the south. Jiang Pingji raised her head when she heard this. The corners of her lips curled into a slight smile. She looked. It was someone she knew. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice, and saw a man in plain clothes sitting in the corner. He was dressed rather shabbily, but he had a very noble temperament. The other party sensed Jiang Pingji's gaze and nodded slightly, returning a smile. Jiang Pingji also greeted him through the air. That person was none other than Enshui, the one who had helped her quickly recover Qingde County, and Duoshi. Enshui had set off a few days earlier than Jiang Pingji. Because he was a nobody and mostly had miscellaneous troops, he could not be considered an official feudal power. Although he was looked down upon, Enshui was not angry. As long as he had a seat at the alliance meeting, he did not ask for much else. Huang Song did not know En Shui, but En Shui's answer was good, allowing him to smoothly elicit the next part of the conversation. Just like what the gentleman said just now, if there is no unified command, the 400,000 allied troops will be scattered like sand. They will be a motley crew in Prince Changshuo's eyes. So what if they have a large number of troops? They are not worth fearing at all. He only needs to use the delay tactic to make the allied troops fall apart and return with their tails between their legs. Huang Song straightened his expression and said solemnly, "Does everyone think that what I said makes sense?" Everyone had a guilty conscience. A few of the big shots looked deep in thought. The father and son of the Liu family were still watching the show. What sense does it make? Someone disagreed. Everyone looked and saw that the person who spoke was a burly old general. Looking at his face, this person was rather stubborn. The youngsters who stand out today will only boost the morale of others and diminish their own prestige. The allied troops have 400,000 men and horses. How can they not deal with a mere thief? Let's not talk about anything else. If I were to go out, I would definitely chop off the thief's head and use it as a teacup. Huang Song did not like to reason with stubborn people, because the other party would not listen. It did not matter how much he said. A thief is a thief, but we cannot look down on him just because he is a thief. You are an old general and I respect you, but I will not agree with what you said just now. Prince Changshuo has 100,000 elite troops. The Meng family of Tsang Prefecture used their military seal to mobilize 50,000 to help. Among them, there are also 10,000 cavalry. The troops are strong and their horses are strong. They have ample provisions. On the other hand, our allied troops claim to have 400,000 strong soldiers. But how many true elites do we have? The old general wanted to say something, but was pushed back by the people beside him. He could only flush with anger. In a public event like the alliance meeting, he was actually humiliated by a junior, a descendant of a eunuch. How could he not be angry? Su Bei lowered his eyes and continued Huang Song's words. Chief Huang's words are naturally reasonable. What brilliant plan do you have? Huang Song paused and finally revealed his plan. The only way is to elect an alliance leader to lead the allied troops. When Su Bei heard this, the corners of his lips curled up. Huang Song's words were exactly what he wanted. He was about to ask in detail, when a fool jumped out of nowhere and suggested, "Elect an alliance leader? This is a good plan. This way, we can unify the distribution of military supplies and let the allied troops be united. We can advance and retreat together. Only then can we contend against the thieves." Chapter 7:14. For the powerful feudal lords, this suggestion was beneficial, but for those with poor family backgrounds, the disadvantages far outweighed the advantages. Military supplies would be allocated and rations and resources would be supervised by others. Everyone was afraid of being at a disadvantage. Jiang Pingji almost choked. She hurriedly gulped down a pot of water to calm herself down. The person who suggested this is a bit naive, really. This suggestion was terrible. Not to mention others. Even Li Yun and Dian Yin could tell that it was unrealistic. Their own troops, their own rations, their own horses. Why should they be under someone else's control? It was undeniable that there were saints who were willing to do so. But the allied forces all had their own plans. They haggled over every cent. So why would they be willing to be at a disadvantage? Even if they all agreed, their family backgrounds and assets were different. What if they withheld a portion and reported a false number? It had to be said that this idea was too naive. The difficulty of actually carrying it out was as high as the heavens. Jiang Pingji curiously looked in the direction of the voice. She realized that the idiot who had spoken was sitting behind Yang Jian. He was probably one of Yang Jian's men. "Sit down, unfilial son. You have no right to speak here." Yang Jian's old face was flushed. He was so angry that he looked extremely ashamed. Jiang Pingji understood. So this idiot was Yang Jian's son. It was truly a misfortune for the family to have such an innocent son. "Father? Son?" Yang Tao didn't know what he had done wrong. He stammered, feeling a little guilty. He wanted to ask where he had done wrong, but he was afraid that his question would be too stupid and incur his father's wrath. Sitting next to Yang Tao was a handsome young scholar, who forced a smile on his face. Zhengzi, sit down. The young scholar secretly face-bombed. How could such a stupid and naive fellow be his friend? Yang Tao shrank his neck. He looked pitiful. Under the attacks of both his father and his best friend, he sat down pitifully. Jiang Pengji held back her laughter. So you are Yang Jian's son. What an interesting person. Lu Shi nonchalantly agreed. His gaze lingered on Yang Tao for a while, as if he was observing something. He slightly lowered his eyes. His gaze was somewhat complicated. Although he looks a little simple-minded, he is not simple. His future is limitless. Jiang Pengji looked at Lu Shi in surprise, then at Yang Tao. She laughed and teased. Simple-minded indeed. As for not simple, forgive my poor judgment, but I really can't tell. This person looks like a clean sheet of paper. One can see through him at a glance. It is rare. I thought that Commandant Yang's son would also be a brave young general. But now that I've seen him, he's completely different from what I imagined. Instead, he looks more like the foolish son of a landlord. Lu Shi laughed. Perhaps the foolish have their own fortune. The father and son talked in a low voice, which was incompatible with the surrounding atmosphere. Yang Jian had already been isolated by the alliance, and now that his son had caused such a ruckus, he felt like he had lost all face. He's just a child who doesn't know any better. He's just babbling nonsense. Don't take it to heart. Yang Jian's smile was very forced. Even his carefully groomed beard could not hide his awkwardness. In his mind, he had already given his son a few beatings. The atmosphere was slightly tense. Su Bei smiled as he tried to smooth things over, bringing the topic back to the main topic. He didn't keep them in suspense. He hurriedly explained his plan to prevent another simple-minded person from popping up. According to Huang Song's plan, the armies of the 23 powers would still be managed by themselves. They would still be self-sufficient in terms of military expenses. According to Huang Song's plan, the armies of the 23 powers would still be managed by themselves. They would still be self-sufficient in terms of military expenses. However, once the alliance leader issued an order, they would have to prioritize the alliance. They would have to cooperate in attack or defense. Selfish motives were not allowed. The alliance leader had a certain amount of authority over them, but he would not interfere with their internal affairs. He would not require them to pay extra. Compared to Yang Tao's idea, everyone preferred Huang Song's. They were willing to lend out their troops and cooperate in battle, but they couldn't hand over military authority to outsiders. For example, if the alliance leader had selfish motives and purposely preserved the strength of his own army, then turned around and pushed the other powers to the front lines, what should they do? They didn't want to measure the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain, but they had to be wary of others. The 23 powers present were all connected. Who could guarantee that there were no grudges between them? Huang Song's suggestion was exactly what they wanted. It could unify the alliance and prevent it from disintegrating. It also dispelled their worries. Su Pei said, "This is a good plan. What do you all think?" There were almost no objections. It was considered a unanimous decision. Now the highlight of the show was here. Who would be the alliance leader? Everyone looked at each other. No one wanted to be the first to stand out. They silently waited for others to recommend them. Yes, they were waiting for others to recommend them. Everyone present was a big shot. Why would they act like they were trying to sell their melons and boast about themselves? Even if they were itching to get a megaphone and shout, "Choose me, choose me." On the surface, they would still decline in a reserved manner. In Jiang Pingji's words, this was pretentious. People who were modest did not behave this way. Jiang Pingji thought that the first to stand out would be Huang Song. She didn't expect someone to be one step ahead of him and speak first. I think that County Chief Wu Ma of Hu County is the most suitable candidate for the alliance leader position. The person who spoke was Shui. When he spoke, Su Pei and Su Fei's expressions turned ugly. Shui continued, "County Chief Wu Ma is a relative of the royal family. In terms of seniority, he is the uncle of the current emperor. He has great prestige and a strong military force. I think that if County Chief Wu Ma is the alliance leader, and the alliance army conquers Prince Changsho, saving the emperor and the people, it will be even more justifiable." Wu Ma Shang sat on the right side of the seat. From beginning to end, He looked like he was daydreaming. His entire image did not fit in with the crowd, and Shui had pushed him into the battle for the alliance leader position. Jiang Pingji didn't know if it was in Shui's idea or County Chief Wu Ma's. Jiang Pingji looked over and was more inclined to County Chief Wu Ma's idea. It looked like he was quite ambitious. She grabbed a handful of dried fruits and stuffed them into her mouth, eating them with relish. It tasted even better with this good show. That's not right. In my opinion, County Chief Wu Ma is not the best candidate. Cheng Jing, who was behind Huang Song, stood up from his seat. The moment he opened his mouth, he attracted everyone's attention. Hearing Cheng Jing's voice, Wu Ma Shang, who had been silent all this time, turned his eyes and looked at Cheng Jing. Who are you? Cheng Jing's personality was not one to flaunt. He calmly said, I am Cheng Jing of Langia, a nobody. If it were Feng Zhen, he would definitely retort, I am Master Yuanjing's first disciple. In a place like Dongqing, Master Yuanjing was a living signboard. With his name on it, one's value would rise. Wu Ma Shang looked away. Chapter 7:15. The way he spoke was also known as the aristocratic accent. It was elegant and tactful, with a hint of a different kind of elegance. Many people deliberately pursued such a way of speaking in order to be cultured. Although this tone sounded elegant and beautiful, it sounded distant and disdainful under different circumstances. The meaning behind Wu Ma Shang's words clearly belonged to the latter. Huang Song glared angrily at Wu Ma Shang. He had actually dared to humiliate Cheng Jing in front of him. Did this person really think that being a member of the imperial family was so great? Just as he was about to open his mouth to regain his dignity, he heard Jiang Pengji's half-smiling voice. It was a familiar voice with a tone that made one's skin crawl. As it turned out, when Wu Ma Xian was criticizing Cheng Jing, Jiang Pengji turned her head and asked her father a question in the same tone of a gentry. Father, I've heard that Master Yuanjing's disciples are all talents that the feudal vassals want to rope in. They are very popular. Now that I've seen it, I feel that this rumor cannot be completely trusted. If that wasn't the case, how could senior brother Cheng Jing have been slapped in the face? After all, he was Master Yuanjing's first disciple. He shouldn't be so down, right? Or is Master Yuanjing not as good as he used to be? Wu Ma Shang. What? Whose first disciple? Cheng Jing glanced at Jiang Pengji, his expression calm as usual. There is a reason why Jing said that County Chief Wu Ma is not the best candidate. Let me ask all of you, which traitor is it that has shaken the foundation of the country? That person used his status as a member of the imperial clan to attempt to encroach on the throne and bring chaos to the nation. It might not be appropriate for Chief Wu Ma to become the leader of the 400,000 allied army. What if the traitors bite back, slandering us for not coming to the rescue of the emperor, but for gathering the masses to rebel, to establish a new ruler? What should we do then? These casual words made Wu Ma Shang's face turn as black as the bottom of a pot. This person could no longer maintain his original noble bearing and glared angrily at Cheng Jing, as if he wanted to stare two holes in his eyes. Jiang Pengji secretly gave Cheng Jing a thumbs up. This brother's words were extremely vicious. Cheng Jing and Wei Ci were indeed Master Yuanjing's disciples. The senior and junior brothers were of the same lineage. Usually they did not make a sound, but when they made a move it was fatal. It was a dark heart passed down from generation to generation. Begging for monthly votes on my knees. Cheng Jing versus Wu Ma Shang. Cheng Jing wins. Qingshan Mujio. It was a clean win. He struck his opponent out 3 times. Qiu Zipio. When Shui mentioned it, I also felt that Wu Ma Shang was the most suitable candidate to be the leader. After all, his status and experience are there for all to see. However, when it was Cheng Jing's turn to speak, I was speechless. Cheng Jing's battle prowess was off the charts. He had directly pinned Wu Ma Shang to the ground and cleanly stripped him of his right to compete for the position of alliance leader. I don't know if it's just my imagination, but Cheng Jing seems to hold a grudge. Do you guys feel the same way? He felt that after today, the magical follower pet, Cheng Jing, was going to be famous. Wu Ma Shang had used disdainful words and attitude to humiliate Cheng Jing, and Cheng Jing had immediately responded. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You deliberately humiliated me, so I directly stepped on your weak spot. The slap in the face came too quickly like a hurricane. Before the audience could react, Wu Mashang had already been sent out of the competition stage. Cheng Jing had already given his word, so no one dared to go against his wishes and recommend Wu Mashang again. As the first person to recommend Wu Mashang, Chui was not angry. It was as if he had not said what he had said earlier. As the host, Zhu Bei gave Cheng Jing a look of praise. He was surprised. If Lu Shi had not mentioned it, he would not have known that Master Yuanjing's disciples had already entered officialdom. He had already met 2 of them in such a short time. One assisted Lu Shi, the other Huang Song. Wei Xi's drawing skills shocked him. Cheng Jing had a sharp tongue and hit the nail on the head. Zhu Bei was both happy and regretful. Such a talent was not his. Chui's recommendation of Wu Mashang was reasonable and well-founded. Zhu Bei had been worried for a while. After all, Wu Mashang was a member of the royal family. If the other party was determined to fight, the competition would be very strong. Unexpectedly, Cheng Jing had appeared midway and directly killed Wu Mashang's right to participate in the competition. Zhu Bei found him very pleasing to the eye. Master Cheng has thought things through thoroughly. Do you have a suitable candidate in mind? Cheng Jing lowered his eyes, his gaze drifting to Jiang Pingji. I believe that in terms of ability, prestige and experience, Lu Shi is the best candidate. Cheng Jing did not say that Lu Shi was the best person. If Lu Shi was not willing to be the alliance leader, everyone had other choices. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. Was Cheng Jing trying to stir up trouble? She secretly glanced at Cheng Jing, who was also looking at her. Cheng Jing nodded slightly at her, a friendly smile on his face. Naturally, Lu Shi would not take the blame. He tactfully declined, expressing that he was not suitable to be the alliance leader. At the same time, he flattered Zhu Bei and Su Fei. He was impartial, making it difficult for others to figure out his stance. Zhu Bei secretly broke out in a cold sweat, afraid that something unexpected would happen. If Lu Shi changed his stance at the last minute, his painstaking efforts would go down the drain. When he looked at Jiang Pingji, she gave him a look, indicating for him to be at ease. Only then did Zhu Bei's anxious heart calm down. Lu Shi kicked the ball out, but he also circled out the candidates, Zhu Bei and Su Fei. Everyone present was shrewd. Before the start of the alliance meeting, the Su brothers had made frequent moves. They all knew in their hearts that the battle for the alliance leader would be decided between these 2. A snake could not live without a head. No matter how they wrangled, there had to be an alliance leader. Zhu Bei had a group of supporters, but Su Fei also had his own fans. Jiang Pingji and Lu Shi watched the show. The father and daughter worked together to finish 4 plates of dried fruits. There was only 1 plate on each table. After they finished their portion, they even took Li Yin and Dian Yan's portions. I'm thirsty from all the food. We've wrangled for more than 2 hours. It's just a trivial matter, yet we've been arguing for so long. Lu Shi smiled faintly and lowered his voice. It's a matter of interests and disputes. It's always a long process. That was why he did not care for the alliance leader position. It was just an empty title. What was the point of wasting so much effort? Excluding Lu Shi and Lu Shi, Su Fei had received slightly more support than Zhu Bei. Unfortunately, Zhu Bei had already gained Jiang Pingji's friendship the day before. With the Lu family's father and son joining the alliance, Zhu Bei had a clear advantage over Jiang Pingji and became the alliance leader. Even though he was prepared, when the dust settled, Zhu Bei still could not suppress the excitement in his heart. On the other hand, Su Fei's expression darkened. If it wasn't for Zhu Bei's deceit, scheming against him, and pulling away the support of the Lu father and son, the alliance leader position would have been his. The alliance leader was successfully chosen. Everyone happily ate, drank, and enjoyed the dance of the dancers. The atmosphere was joyous. On the surface, it seemed that everything was on track. Everyone was full of confidence in the crusade against Prince Changsho and the reorganization of the imperial court. The road before them was smooth, and the future was bright. Inside the tent, there was an endless stream of music. Graceful beauties swayed their graceful bodies. Watching them made one's eyes go wide and their limbs stiffen. Such an atmosphere was too lively, Regardless of whether one could drink or not, they all drank a little. Chapter 7:16. After embarrassing himself, Yang Tao obediently sat in the background. Looking at the wine on the table, the alcohol in his stomach began to stir. Xiao Yang, just let me drink a little. Just one cup? Not even a drop. The young scholar glanced at him coldly. Yang Tao tensed up. Your old wounds haven't healed, and you still want to drink? Yang Tao lowered his head and looked at his father, Yang Jian, who was sitting in front of him gulping down wine. He seemed to be in a bad mood. Father, your arrow wounds haven't healed yet. You shouldn't drink right now. Yang Jian glared at him. Little brat, now you have the guts to mind your father's business? Yang Tao was speechless. His heart had been stabbed twice by his best friend and father. His heart was broken. The young scholar Yang Tao, called Xiao Yang, held his wine cup and observed the scene around him. Everyone was drunk, and the atmosphere was very lively. In comparison, the people around Yang Jian treated him like air. They looked everywhere, but at him, obviously isolating him. Yang Jian's drinking had something to do with this. The young scholar squinted his eyes and snorted with disdain. Even though the leader of the alliance had been elected, it didn't change the fact that everyone had their own agenda. He wasn't optimistic about the outcome of this rescue mission. Otherwise, why wouldn't everyone seriously discuss the plan after the leader was elected? Instead, they were drinking and having fun? As he thought about it, he keenly noticed that someone was staring at him. After searching for a while, he finally found the source of the gaze. It was Lu Shi. The middle-aged man, sitting on the left, smiled at him in a friendly manner. The young scholar was suspicious. Xiao Yang, I just saw Governor Lu smiling at me, Yang Tao whispered to his best friend. The young scholar frowned and suppressed his suspicions. Yeah, Governor Lu is just as I imagined. A gentle and kind person. A long time ago, Lu Shi was still the governor of Hu County. Zhangzhou's Eastgate County had a food shortage and had to rely on Hu County's food to survive. Therefore, Yang Tao had a good impression of Lu Shi. He always believed that he was a good person. If Yang Jian knew what his son was thinking, he would definitely vomit blood. How was Lu Shi a good person? Did he send food for disaster relief for free? That was all because Yang Jian had paid a price for it. Lu Shi, that unscrupulous businessman, had squeezed him dry in secret. How could he be considered a good person? The young man beside Lu Prefecture's magistrate is Lu Shi, the one who asked father for help? He looks alright, but his bones aren't too strong. Not strong enough. When Yang Jian heard his son's words, he almost spat out the wine in his mouth. If Lu Shi could not be considered healthy, then what kind of person could be considered healthy? Learn from other people's wisdom. You're already an adult, yet you only know how to write your own name. Yang Tao, who had been ridiculed by his father for no reason, was speechless. It's okay. I have Xiao Yang anyway. Yang Tao admitted that he wasn't good at studying, and his brain wasn't good at scheming, but it was fine as long as his close friend was good at it. To put it in more modern terms, Yan Lin was Yang Tao's external brain, and this was a one-to-one match. The banquet lasted until the middle of the night. Most of the people in the tent were drunk. Jiang Pingji also drank some wine and prepared to get up to change her clothes. Magistrate Lu. As soon as she stepped out of the tent, she realized that someone was following her. She couldn't help but stop. You are? She squinted her eyes and realized that it was the young scholar beside Yang Tao. I am Yan Lin, courtesy name Xiao Yang, the young scholar said. Magistrate, when do you plan to return the man you borrowed? Jiang Pingji crossed her arms and asked him in return. Why? It hasn't even been 2 days, and County Military Chief Yang is already rushing me? Yan Lin said. The county military chief didn't rush me. It was my idea. I think Qi Kuang is a good person. I'm afraid he won't return him. I don't think County Military Chief Yang will mind if a centurion stays or goes. Borrow? She always took. Even if she borrowed, she would never return it. Yan Lin frowned. Jiang Pingji's words had confirmed his speculation. Magistrate Lu is still stuck in the north, and his footing isn't stable. Yet he's already thinking about the south, where there's plenty of water. He was eating from his bowl and looking at the pot, but he was still thinking about the one that hadn't been put into the pot. Everyone should have dreams. Can't I prepare for a rainy day? Jiang Pingji said with a smile. The water army will come in handy sooner or later. Magistrate Liu, you have great ambitions, Yanlin said. If you don't have ambitions, what's the difference between you and a stranded salted fish? Jiang Pingji suddenly thought of something. She said, instead of testing me, Mr. Yan, why don't you help County Military Chief Yang find a way out? He's someone Prince Changsho promoted, so the Alliance is afraid of him. But he's already on the same boat as the Alliance. In Prince Changsho's eyes, he's betraying his master. If Yang Jian is pushed to the vanguard position, you have to be careful. She wasn't afraid of anything else, but she was afraid that Yang Jian would be used as cannon fodder by the Alliance to test Prince Changsho's combat power. Yanlin's face darkened. He knew that Jiang Pingji wasn't lying. He'd been worried about that recently. Thank you for the reminder. No problem. Jiang Pingji and Lu Shi ate their fill. The father and daughter brought a group of guards with them and prepared to leave. On the way, Li Yun, the honest child, said, My lord, I feel that something's wrong with this alliance meeting. Jiang Pingji asked him, What's wrong? Why did they only choose one alliance leader? Why didn't they discuss how to split the troops, how to save His Majesty, or how to resist Prince Changsho? As Jiang Pingji's military officer, Li Yun was young and inexperienced. Even though he was full of doubts, he didn't dare say anything. After all, not everyone was as naive and pure as Yang Tao. Dian Yan followed behind. I also feel that something's wrong, but I can't pinpoint what's wrong, Jiang Pingji explained with a smile. Everyone has their own plans. They're all very shrewd. Whoever takes the vanguard will sacrifice more. Who would be willing to suffer such a loss? Who wouldn't want to take advantage of the situation, if they could take advantage of the situation? Who wouldn't want to take advantage of the situation without putting in any effort? Now let's see who can't hold back, and bring up the matter of sending troops first. If no one brings it up, I'm afraid it'll drag on for a few more days. Li Yun was dumbfounded. In his imagination, the forces of the alliance meeting were all brave and good at fighting. They would fight to the death with Prince Changsho no matter what. At the banquet just now, he also heard many people denouncing Prince Changsho. They scolded him to their heart's content, wishing they could dig up his ancestors' graves. But in reality, one by one, they shouted slogans and fought to be at the back. Jiang Pingji smiled faintly and concluded, So you see, the outcome of this alliance meeting won't be good. Then, my lord, what should we do? Li Yun asked. Jiang Pingji said, Your lord is here to take a look. I'm not here to fight to the death. Let's just go with the flow. Li Yun was silent for a while. He said, It's a pity that Officer Meng. He's been working hard these days. Meng Hun was so busy that he couldn't be seen. Apart from eating and sleeping, he spent the rest of his time training his troops or practicing martial arts. Even the bystanders would feel exhausted for him when they saw how desperate he was. Chapter 717. This is already the third day. The alliance leader's tent is filled with joyous songs. The feudal vassals are drunk and dreaming, indulging in the land of beauties. Cheng Jing and Feng Ju sat opposite each other. The two of them each held a black and white chess piece, and were fighting on the chessboard. It was hard to determine the victor. Feng Ju's expression was calm, and his jade-like black eyes drooped slightly. Didn't you already expect this? Everyone in the alliance meeting had their own ulterior motives. The Lu father and son and the Su brothers, who were capable of carrying the weight of the alliance, had gone on strike and slacked off, while the latter only knew how to study their reputation and form cliques for personal gain. The alliance was like a group of dragons without a leader. Even though they had formed an alliance and chosen an alliance leader, in the end, they were still not strong enough. If people are of one mind, what's the difference between that and a plate of loose sand? Feng Ju lowered his voice and thought about his next move. This time, it was his turn to make a move. He had to be extremely careful with this step. Otherwise, what awaited him would be Cheng Jing's storm-like attacks. Feng Ju's style of playing chess was to advance step by step. Regardless of whether it was offense or defense, he had to be flawless, which was suitable for long-term battles. The longer he delayed, the better it would be for him. Cheng Jing's style was somewhat similar to Feng Ju's. What was different was that once he found a loophole, the originally gentle breeze and drizzle would turn into a violent storm, extremely aggressive. Feng Ju was steady, while Cheng Jing was seeking danger amidst stability. Cheng Jing said, "What a pity. I thought Lu Shi would fight for the position of alliance leader. If this person is the alliance leader, the situation might be different." Feng Ju was surprised and asked, "Does Yimo have a high opinion of Lu Lanting? Lu Shi alone was able to reverse the decline of so many vassal forces?" Lu Shi studied under Master for 3 years. Master valued him very much. Lu Shi had studied for 3 years, stirred up trouble for 3 years, and constantly made enemies. If he didn't have a strong backer and a good father to support him, he might have gotten into trouble long ago. However, this person was capable of causing trouble, and was not afraid of it. On the surface, he looked calm and composed, but on the inside, he hated evil as if it was his enemy. If he were the alliance leader, he probably wouldn't be able to tolerate those people who indulged in singing and dancing all day long. As for Su Bei, a glib tongue good at business, concerned about reputation, but not about facts. With such a person as the alliance leader, in the end, he will only pretend that everything is peaceful. Don't underestimate the fact that the alliance leader's reputation was greater than his actual power. However, he still had some influence on the alliance. With Su Bei's personality as the alliance leader, he was bound to fail miserably. Cheng Jing could see it clearly, which was why he didn't have high hopes for this alliance meeting. He wasn't the only one. Many people in the alliance could see it too, but they didn't say it out loud. Feng Ju looked down. That's a pity. Lu Shi obviously wants to stay out of this. He won't get involved in this. As the two of them were talking, the tent flap was lifted, and cold wind poured in through the opening. Huang Song's footsteps were hurried, and his face was still full of anger. Cheng Jing and Feng Ju looked at each other, and then at Huang Song. The alliance isn't holding a banquet? The banquet was disrupted by Yang Jian. He brought men with him and charged into the tent. What? How could Yang Jian? Feng Ju was shocked by the news. Why would Yang Jian suddenly bring his men to the alliance's camp? Huang Song took a deep breath. Seeing Feng Ju's reaction, he knew that he had misunderstood. He hurriedly explained. I haven't finished speaking. Yang Jian only brought a few personal guards with him, and charged into the tent. However, he didn't hurt anyone. He only broke everyone's table, and caused a scene at the banquet. He called out Su Bei by name, pointed at his nose and scolded him. The situation just now was spectacular. Those people's faces looked as if they had been splashed with ink. How satisfying. When Feng Ju and Cheng Jing heard this, they groaned inwardly. Did Yang Jian have a death wish? Yang Jian had already been isolated by the alliance. Now, he had caused a scene at the camp and threatened the alliance leader. One could only imagine how much damage Yang Jian's power would suffer. Cheng Jing thought about it, and suddenly felt that something was wrong. He said, My lord, could it be that Yang Jian has left the alliance? Huang Song was gulping down water. When he heard Cheng Jing's words, he instinctively replied. How did Yimo know? The alliance held banquets every day. Cheng Jing and Feng Ju were extremely disgusted by this, and refused to go. They would rather stay in the tent and play chess. Cheng Jing thought to himself as expected. Yang Jian is trying to protect himself. If he doesn't find a chance to leave the alliance, I'm afraid he'll bring disaster upon himself. Although I don't know who advised him to do this, it was indeed a smart move. Without destruction there can't be construction. If we don't make a big deal out of it, we'll be passive at every turn. Cheng Jing frowned as if deep in thought. Alright, when my lord came in from outside the tent just now, why did you look so angry? If Cheng Jing hadn't mentioned this, Huang Song would have almost forgotten. As soon as he mentioned it, the anger that was about to be extinguished reignited. Those bastards in the alliance are really inhumane, Huang Song scolded angrily. At the same time, Jiang Pingji returned to her own camp, reeking of alcohol. She wore a faint smile on her lips, and seemed to be in a good mood. She went to the alliance to report to Su Bei. Su Bei had already helped her find 15 clients. Including Su Bei, she had sold 16 recipes for the flashing bricks. This was a huge sum of money. How could Jiang Pingji not be happy? As for how chaotic the alliance was, she didn't care. Li Yun blindly followed behind her, guarding her sides with Dian Yen. My lord, will Chief Yang be alright? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, if Yang Jian hadn't caused a ruckus today, he would be. That day, she brought Li Yun and Dian Yen to the alliance's camp for free food and drinks. Halfway through the meal, Yang Jian and a dozen guards in armor barged into the tent. Without saying a word, they drew their swords and chopped down a few tables. Everyone was in a mess. Yang Jian pointed at everyone's noses and started scolding them. Su Bei was the one who was scolded the most. To be honest, regarding Yang Jian's scolding, Jiang Pingji believed that someone must be helping him from behind. Otherwise, how could he have scolded them so fluently? Even if he scolded them, Yang Jian's scolding was reasonable. While everyone was angry, they couldn't help but feel guilty. After scolding them to his heart's content, Yang Jian announced that he was withdrawing from the alliance. He was only withdrawing from the alliance, not giving up on protecting the emperor. He was willing to use all his military forces to save the emperor, but he didn't want to be in cahoots with these thugs in the alliance. After saying this, Yang Jian left with his guards, leaving behind a room full of dumbfounded people. Thinking of that scene, Jiang Pingji couldn't help but laugh. It was too funny. Why? Because before Yang Jian ran over to cause a ruckus, someone had already suggested letting Yang Jian's troops take the lead. It was obvious that they wanted to use them as cannon fodder. Once this suggestion was made, it was immediately seconded by many. No one cared about Yang Jian's personal opinion. After a short while, Yang Jian ran to the tent with his guards and caused a ruckus. Then he left in a carefree manner. The slap in the face came too quickly, like a hurricane passing through. On the other side, when Yang Jian heard the exact news, he was furious but also vaguely afraid. Chapter 7:18. Yang Jian slammed his fist on the table angrily. Yan Lin said calmly, the most important thing now is to protect ourselves and prevent them from backstabbing us. Yang Jian's actions this time had thoroughly offended the alliance. However, he had only withdrawn from the alliance, not the emperor. Those people couldn't do anything to Yang Jian in the open. After some time, the alliance leader Su Bei might come personally. Has my lord thought of a way to deal with him? Yang Tao asked curiously. What is Su Bei coming here for? Yan Lin smiled as he explained. Su Bei is the alliance leader. If he doesn't handle this matter well, then any of the feudal vassals will withdraw from the alliance at will. The alliance will only exist in name, and his authority as the alliance leader will be gone as well. Therefore, Su Bei will definitely come. Yang Tao had no idea. He felt that he couldn't think of a good solution, so he just waited for his friend. Yan Lin was already used to it. He said, if Su Bei comes personally, he will definitely apologize and invite my lord back. With the previous farce, the alliance will not dare to go overboard or be too conspicuous. My lord, you can be more magnanimous and let bygones be bygones. Yang Tao was surprised. Why? He just withdrew from the alliance, and now he's going back? It would be embarrassing to be so fickle. Yang Jian understood. Creating a ruckus at the banquet was not so much to protect themselves, but to express their attitude and make the alliance afraid. If things went too far, with just Yang Jian's 15,000 troops, it would be difficult for them to resist the pressure of the alliance. Rather than having a falling out, it was better to each take a step back and protect each other's reputation and interests. All right, then let's do as Xiaoyang suggested. As expected, 2 hours later, Su Bei came to visit them personally. When Jiang Pingji heard Su Bei swallow his pride and advise Yang Jian, she knew that the highlight of the alliance meeting was about to begin. Yang Jian's ruckus was equivalent to exposing the alliance's fig leaf. They couldn't continue to lie to themselves. They could only brace themselves and discuss official matters. After all, we are the alliance that came to save the emperor. We have to put on a show. Jiang Pingji smiled. Life was finally not boring. Before no one exposed them, no one took the lead. Everyone lied to themselves and others, slacking off whenever they could. Now that Yang Jian had caused trouble and exposed the fact that they were slacking off, they could only pack their bags and go back to work. On that day, Alliance leader Su Bei invited all the powers to discuss important matters. This time it wasn't about eating, drinking, or watching a dance. Some people were indifferent, watching the show while others were rubbing their fists, eager to give it a try. Under the leadership of the Alliance chief, Su Bei, everyone gathered together to discuss how to rescue the emperor and annihilate the traitors who had brought chaos to the imperial court. Some people suggested attacking Prince Changsho first. Only by killing him could Qinzhou be safe. Someone suggested entering Qinzhou first and finding a way to ally with the forces there to resist Prince Changsho's forces. There were also people who suggested attacking Prince Changsho's base in Zhangzhou to see if he would come to the rescue. The first two suggestions were reasonable, but the last one was simply a joke. Yan Lin glared at his best friend, Yang Tao, who had suggested the funny idea, shrunk his neck and shut his mouth. After discussing for a while, no one was able to reach a consensus, because no one could convince anyone else. Listening to the strategists from various families bickering, Jiang Pingji had the urge to fall asleep. She raised her sleeve to cover her mouth and yawned. She squeezed out 2 drops of tears from the corners of her eyes. Then, as if nothing had happened, she put down her sleeve and continued to daydream. She had the audience in the streaming room. These idle people could chat with her and kill time together. The others didn't have such a thing. How did the others endure such a boring and long meeting? Jiang Pingji was daydreaming when she heard someone mention her name. She subconsciously raised her head to look at the other person. Although she was daydreaming, the audience in the streaming room recorded it for her. The bullet screen was filled with handwritten subtitles typed by the audience. Rose Legend. Streamer, Master Yuanjing said that you studied at Langyi Academy, and that Master Yuanjing valued you. He felt that we should work together, so he asked if you had any good suggestions. Damn, why did this fellow suddenly drag the streamer into this? She was calm and composed, without any flaws. No one noticed that she was daydreaming. I can't say that it's a brilliant idea, but I do have some suggestions. Jiang Pingji named a few feudal lords and pointed out their strengths and weaknesses in a concise manner. Finally, she said, the alliance has a large number of soldiers and generals. They're independent. If we force them to merge, even with the alliance's command, I'm afraid they won't be as flexible as normal armies. So in my opinion, I suggest that we split our forces. One group will reinforce Qinzhou. One group will contain Prince Changsho's forces. Another group will provide support from the side. And then another group will take a detour and attack Prince Changsho's rear. Because of the lack of cooperation between the 23 forces, they couldn't unleash the combat power of 400,000 soldiers and horses. Since that was the case, it was better to split their forces, display their flexibility, and play to their strengths and avoid their weaknesses. However, as soon as she finished speaking, an old general faintly mocked her. If we split our forces like this, won't we be waiting to be defeated one by one? Our army has 400,000 soldiers. Why don't we attack the enemy directly and capture him alive? Why do we use a roundabout strategy? A young man is a young man. You're just showing off your ability to be an armchair strategist. Jiang Pingji laughed as she threw away the dried fruit in her hand. I'm an armchair strategist. Old general, you're illiterate. Based on what you've said, why don't you say that our army has 400,000 soldiers who can descend from the sky and crush the enemy into minced meat? That each person can drown him with their spit? You. The old general had never suffered such ridicule before. His temper flared up, and he wanted to draw his weapon and fight her to the death. Dian Yan and Li Yin were not to be outdone. They stepped forward to protect Jiang Pingji. The entire tent was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Cheng Jing, who had suggested to listen to Jiang Pingji's opinion, was speechless. He had only heard of Lu Shi's sharp tongue and how he deserved a beating from others, but he had never heard it with his own ears. Only now did he understand why others always gnashed their teeth in anger whenever this person was mentioned. His tongue was too cheap, comparable to Feng Zhen's. It was not easy for Su Bei to be the leader of the alliance. He could not sit idly by and let the two of them really fight. Su Bei stood out to be the peacemaker. Lanting, it's not impossible to split our forces. Old General's suggestion isn't bad either. Thus, Su Bei received a look of disdain from Jiang Pingji. He was a fence-sitter. Su Bei coughed softly and said, "Now that Chenzhou is in a state of emergency, we don't know how much longer we can hold out. We should end the battle quickly and kill the enemy as soon as possible. It's not advisable to delay. The longer we delay, the more danger His Majesty will be in. Lanting's method is safe and secure, but it will take a long time. As for the old general's suggestion, I agree with it. Our alliance has 400,000 soldiers. Every one of them is unafraid of death and hardship. They are brave and skillful in battle. As long as we work together, we will be able to destroy the enemy as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. We will restore our country and restore order to the imperial court." Hearing this, Jiang Pingji secretly snorted. Chapter 719. Mister, you really have a divine foresight. These mobs are really useless. Prince Changsha was initially very fearful of the alliance's military strength. It was a military camp that stretched for 200 miles. Just looking at it made him feel cold. He thought that the Allied forces would attack once they were almost gathered. He didn't expect that they would still be dawdling in the same place. For several days, they had been indulging in pleasure, singing and dancing. How could they have the slightest intention to attack? In the blink of an eye, 5 to 6 days had passed. Prince Changsha was overjoyed. According to Meng Zhan's plan, they would pretend to not make a move and use it to confuse the allies. They would let them continue to be in a safe environment where there was no threat. Secretly, they would send a surprise attack to the hinterland of Chenzhou. As long as they took down the emperor and ascended to the throne, Prince Changsha could then, in the name of Dongqing's emperor, confer titles on the various feudal vassals of the alliance army. This would break their unity from within, and the alliance army would collapse on its own. Now everything was going according to plan. How could he not be happy? Meng Zhan was wearing a pure black Confucian robe. He held a closed jade bone fan in his hand. The surface of the fan was old, and the pendant was worn out. This jade fan was his son Meng Liang's favorite treasure. Now, it had become a medium to remind him of his father. Meng Zhan sneered. "Don't be too relieved, Prince. This isn't over yet. This morning, our scouts reported that there have been some changes on the alliance's side. Due to Yang Jian's provocation, he scolded them for being lazy and greedy. The alliance has lost face and is preparing to attack Gemin Pass." After Prince Changsha heard this, his face suddenly turned pale, as if he was covered with a thick layer of powder. What should we do? How can Emir Gemin Pass resist these traitors? Gemin Pass was the only way to enter Chenzhou from Huangshui County. With the help of the Meng family of Zhangzhou, Prince Changsha had already conquered 20% of Chenzhou's territory. Now he was in a stalemate with the imperial court at another checkpoint. If they could break through Jiamen Pass, the Allied forces would catch up with Prince Changsha's army in less than 2 days. At that time, it would be troublesome if they attacked from both the front and back. Meng Zhan's lips were still curled into a cold smile. He said, "What are you afraid of? Because they chose Jiamen Pass, we could attack Chenzhou with peace of mind. If the alliance chose to split up, it would be troublesome." Jiamen Pass was located at the crossroads of the mountain range. The terrain was steep, and the mountains were undulating. At the Jiamen Pass, 2 mountains stood opposite each other. They were steep and shaped like a gate. This is not a good place to fight. Prince Changsha was anxious. It was true that Jiamen Pass was easy to defend, but not easy to attack. But the enemy had 400,000 soldiers, and they could easily break through. "Sir, the Allied forces are outnumbered. I'm afraid that Jiamen Gate won't be able to hold them off. If they are willing to use manpower, impossible," Meng Zhan said decisively. His eyes were cold. "Your Highness, you overestimate their integrity. They are a bunch of greedy people, who would be willing to sacrifice their soldiers and use their dead bodies to clear the way for others. No one is willing, so your Highness can rest assured. Jiamen Pass could hold off the Allied forces for at least half a month. Half a month's time is enough for us to overturn the universe and help you ascend to the throne." There were many elites in the alliance, but they were too selfish. Who knows how many elites will die here in front of Jiamen Pass, haha. Meng Zhan gently tapped his palm with the jade bone fan. His eyes were full of sharpness, with strong killing intent. Jiamen Pass has always been easy to defend and difficult to attack. I wonder how long it will take for the Allied forces to take it down. The Allied forces broke camp and set up camp outside of Jiamen Pass. Jiang Pingji and Huang Song went out to patrol with their men. Looking into the distance, they could vaguely see Jiamen Pass through the fog. Jiang Pingji's eyesight was excellent, so she could see even more clearly. She noticed that there were many new signs of destruction near the gate. Not long ago, Jiamen Pass was still under the control of the imperial court. The general stationed, there was also an experienced general. He had used the natural defenses to keep Prince Changsho's army at the pass. No matter how Prince Changsho challenged them, the general refused to come out. He was determined to defend the pass to the death. Unfortunately, Jiamen Pass had been breached. Huang Song knew that Jiamen Pass was easy to defend and difficult to attack. He was curious about how Prince Changsho had broken through. Did he rely on numbers? Feng Zhen and the others also came out for some fresh air. They also wanted to gather information about the enemy and find some inspiration. Does my lord know what happened? He asked Jiang Pingji. Cheng Jing and Feng Ju secretly looked at each other. Did they ask the wrong person? Under such circumstances, shouldn't the lord ask the strategist? Why is the strategist asking the lord? Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes. It should be fire. Huang Song asked. According to the scouts, there are indeed traces of fire outside Jiamen Pass. But the weather hasn't warmed up yet, and the snow hasn't melted yet. Besides, there are steep cliffs around the pass. All the trees and weeds have been cleared, and there is still snow. How could they have set fire to Jiamen Pass? Under such circumstances, there was nothing to burn even if they wanted to. Jiang Pingji's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. Yang Si and the others all thought of a possibility. It's the corpses. She gave the answer. Yang Si was speechless. I wonder who came up with such a sinister plan. Corpses were flammable. There was fat under the skin. Once they caught fire, the fire would be very strong and difficult to extinguish. In an attack on Jiamen Pass, the attackers would definitely lose the most corpses. Was Prince Changsho crazy? How could he use the corpses of his own soldiers as fuel to burn Jiamen Pass? How would I know? Jiang Pingji smiled. I used to work for Prince Changsho. Is there anyone who fits the bill? In the past, Yang Si might have thought that Jiang Pingji was bringing up the past. But now he was too lazy to think about it. That was just how his lord was. Yang Si thought hard and said, I don't remember. When he was working for Prince Changsho, he was the one with the most sinister thoughts, alright? Maybe he came later, Feng Jin said. Jiang Pingji thought for a moment and smiled. Based on the time, I don't think he worked for Prince Changsho. According to my analysis, the person who came up with this evil plan has something to do with the Mengs. Maybe it was Meng Zhan himself. After all, he is indeed a sinister person. Huang Song was confused. Why does it have something to do with the Mengs? Jiang Pingji smiled but didn't say anything. Cheng Jing said, just look at the results of Prince Changsho's battle with Qinzhou. Before the Mengs joined the battle, Prince Changsho was already showing signs of weakness. He even wanted to retreat. But after the Mengs joined the battle, Prince Changsho became stronger step by step and quickly turned the situation around. His subsequent deployments were much more brilliant than before. He must have been instructed by an expert. It's possible that the person who came up with the plan to break Jiamen Pass was the work of the same person. Huang Song nodded as realization dawned on him. He couldn't help but shiver and get goosebumps when he thought about the possibility of the enemy using corpses as firewood to break through Jiamen Pass. That's true. That person is too evil. Chapter 720. Not to mention history. Such incidents were not uncommon in recent years. Dongqing had suffered many disasters in recent years, and people often traded their children for food. What was the difference between that and eating human flesh? The 4 tribes of Nanman, and the 3 tribes of the northern borderline, had come to the Central Plains to rob and kill people. Eating human flesh was a common occurrence. Huang Song sighed worriedly and said, it's not uncommon, but I don't want to see it if possible. A glint flashed across his eyes. Perhaps, only a prosperous and peaceful world could completely put an end to this kind of tragedy. That's the way of the world. If it could be stopped, who would want it to happen? Jiang Pingji calmly looked in the direction of Jiamen Pass. Who knew how many lives it would take to break through the pass between the steep mountain gates? Cheng Jing glanced at Jiang Pingji out of the corner of his eye. His evaluation of her improved. The wind was strong on the mountain, and Feng Zhen was afraid of the cold. He tightened his cloak around his body, and his lips, which had lost blood all year round, turned a little green. Jiamen Pass is easy to defend and hard to attack. If the people guarding the pass refuse to come out, we'll have to pay a heavy price if we force our way in. But we can't use the corpses as firewood to burn down Jiamen Pass, can we? Feng Zhen took a deep breath and coughed into his fist. But if we don't do that, we'll have to force our way in, and I don't know how much time we'll have to waste. Jiang Pingji looked around and observed the terrain. Her lips were thin, and when she pursed them, she gave off an extremely stubborn feeling. She asked, "How long do you think it'll take for the alliance to break through Jiamen Pass?" Feng Zhu stood beside Huang Song, one hand on his forehead, and carefully looked in the direction of Jiamen Pass. The road before Jiamen Pass is narrow and steep. With the alliance's strength, we can probably break through in a day or two if we force our way in. If Jiamen Pass is well guarded, it'll take us a day or two. Feng Zhu's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. He added, "It's a pity that the alliance doesn't agree with each other. They'll retreat as soon as they see the terrain of Jiamen Pass." Why did they retreat as soon as they saw the terrain of Jiamen Pass? The terrain of the Jiamen Pass was steep and narrow, making it easy to defend and difficult to attack. The vanguard troops that rushed at the front almost died. Who would be willing to be the vanguard? Even if they were willing to fight, they would probably be conserving their strength and slacking off on the battlefield. When Jiang Pingji and Huang Song came out, the alliance was having a meeting. They were discussing who would be the vanguard. Thinking of those people arguing, Feng Zhu rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. He could still hear them arguing. Cheng Jing said, "If we don't solve this problem, Jiamen Pass will hold us back for 10 days, maybe even longer." Half a month. Prince Changshuo's army had already invaded the borders of Qinzhou and was advancing step by step. Who knew what the situation would be like after half a month? At this moment, the alliance's main tent was already in a heated argument. No one wanted to be the vanguard and waste their strength for nothing. However, this time, they didn't dare to use Yang Jian as cannon fodder or a scapegoat. One had to know that Yang Jian had a temper as well. Last time at the brain banquet, he had let loose a torrent of abuse. Even now, they didn't dare mess with Yang Jian. Many forces tacitly began to retreat, trying their best to get others to withdraw. The forces with fewer soldiers complained about how poor they were. If they were to die at Jiamen Pass, how would they be able to face their families? The forces with more soldiers also cried. They claimed that they had more people, but they were all just small fries. Their combat ability was not as strong as the elite troops, so they weren't suitable to be the vanguard. Su Bei sat in the seat of honor, listening to everyone's arguments. He felt like his head was about to explode. His face was getting more and more livid. Su Fei, who was sitting in the seat of honor, was secretly gloating. "Look, you're trying to steal the position of alliance leader from me? Now you're going to suffer." It wasn't easy to be the alliance leader, especially when the hearts of the people were scattered like sand. It was even harder to lead. After arguing for a day, no conclusion was reached. In the end, they parted on bad terms. Jiang Pingji brought Feng Zhen and Yang Si back to the camp. Coincidentally, they bumped into Lu Shi, who had just returned from the main camp. "Father, I have a question." She led Little White to Lu Shi. "Father, do you have time now?" Lu Shi smiled warmly. "As long as it's my Lanting's business, I'm always free." Yang Si and Feng Zhen felt like they had been humiliated by the fake father and daughter. "Father, how much do you know about Meng Zhan from Sangzhou?" she asked. Meng Zhan. Lu Shi frowned when he heard the name of his ex-brother-in-law and good friend, who was now his archenemy. His tone was cold. "Meng Zhan and I used to be classmates, but we broke off our friendship because of your mother and aunt. We don't have much contact now, so we don't know much. Lanting, why are you suddenly mentioning this person? Did you find something when you went out to survey the terrain? Is it related to Meng Zhan? Jiang Pingji said, there are new burn marks at Jiamen Pass. I'm guessing that Prince Changshu used corpses as fuel to break through the pass so quickly. Maybe the person who suggested this plan was Meng Zhan. That's why I want to know more about him. Lu Shi smiled after he heard that. It does sound like Meng Zhan's doing. He's always been like that. On the surface he's kind and gentle, but in the dark he's ruthless and vicious. Lu Shi snorted and said, when I was friends with him, I didn't see this side of him. When he was young, he had the reputation of being a gentleman. However, things change very hard to predict. The Meng family has internal strife. If Meng Zhan doesn't fight, he'll die. When he was young, Meng Zhan was indeed an amazing gentleman. However, time can change a person beyond recognition. Meng Zhan had changed when he was in that kind of environment. Lu Shi didn't see it, so he thought Meng Zhan had always been good. Recommending Meng Zhan and letting his wife's sister, Gu Zhen, marry a werewolf was one of the few blind decisions Lu Shi had made in his life. Lu Shi said, the internal strife in the Meng family is quite serious. If Meng Zhan can stand out, he must be a scheming person. Jiang Pingji frowned and asked Lu Shi about the outcome of the alliance meeting. Lu Shi sneered. A bunch of cowards. Everyone wants to make someone else their scapegoat. What can they expect? After saying goodbye to Lu Shi, Jiang Pingji returned to her tent and spaced out. Let's put ourselves in Meng Zhan's shoes. If Jing Rong and Zi Shi were Meng Zhan, and you helped Prince Changshu conquer Jiamen Pass, what would you do? Feng Zhen and Yang Si looked at each other. From Prince Changshu's point of view, Meng Zhan would buy time and defeat the alliance. Jiamen Pass was a trap. It was enough to intensify the internal strife in the alliance. However, it wasn't enough to intensify the strife. They had to leave a backup plan. Yang Si had worked for Prince Changshu for a while, so he had some understanding of the prince. However, all of Prince Changshu's plans seemed to be the work of the Mengs. When it came to understanding the Mengs, they had to think of Meng Han. Chapter 721. My lord. Not long after, Meng Han appeared in the tent wearing a full suit of armor. His forehead was still beaded with sweat. Stand up. No need for formalities, Jiang Pingji said to Meng Han. I called you here because of the Mengs. You've worked for the Mengs for many years and know them well enough. I want to hear your opinion. Jiang Pingji got straight to the point and briefly explained what had happened at Jiamen Pass and her own speculation. Meng Han was deep in thought. Based on his understanding of Meng Zhan, his plan couldn't be that simple. He was an experienced general after all. I can't say for sure, but Meng Zhan is a scheming man. He's good at building up his base step by step. He's unpredictable. According to you two gentlemen, Jiamen Pass could hold the alliance back for 10 days to half a month. Would Prince Changshu be able to overcome so many obstacles and invade the imperial city of Qinzhou in half a month? If he can't, it'll only take a day or two for the alliance to break through Jiamen Pass and catch up with Prince Changshu's army. When the time comes, the two armies will fight each other. It's hard to say who will win. Feng Zhen and Yang Si had the same idea. Prince Changshu must have a backup plan. Jiang Pingji pointed at the table and said confidently, he's probably splitting up. The three of them nodded. They all believed that was the case. Using the main force to attract the alliance's attention, and secretly sending some of the elites to attack the imperial city of Qinzhou. If that's the case, the imperial city is in danger. Feng Zhen was always serious when it came to business. He didn't look like his usual playful self. He said, Prince Changshu must have calculated the time. Maybe when the alliance breaks through Jiamen Pass, Prince Changshu will break through the imperial city of Qinzhou and capture the emperor. Then he'll threaten the emperor with his life and force him to abdicate the throne. That way, before Feng Zhen could finish his sentence, everyone's faces in the tent darkened. If Prince Changshu really had this plan, the alliance would be in an awkward position. Jiang Pingji rubbed her brows. She told them even worse news. I might know why the Mengs are helping Prince Changshu. Feng Zhen and Yang Si were stunned. They didn't know why Jiang Pingji suddenly brought this up. Meng Han finally understood. He clenched his fists, his face grim, and the hatred in his heart almost rushed out of his throat. For Meng Liang. Yes, it should be about that. Meng Zhan probably suspects that we have something to do with Meng Liang's death. If Prince Changshu becomes the emperor, Meng Zhan will never let go of the Lus, as he has done a great service to the throne. Jiang Pingji's eyes flashed fiercely. What a coincidence. Even if the Mengs didn't come to us, we would have done so sooner or later. The grudges of so many years should finally be settled. Feng Zhen and Yang Si were both dumbfounded. Master, who is Meng Liang? Jiang Pingji said. Meng Liang is Meng Zhan's beloved son. I killed him. What? His lord had killed Meng Zhan's beloved son? When did that happen? Meng Hun's face was filled with guilt. My lord, if it wasn't for me, my lord wouldn't have. Jiang Pingji said. What are you saying? I won't regret killing a little bastard. So what if we offend the Mengs? The Mengs want to bet their treasures on Prince Changshu and use him to get rid of the Lus. They'll have to see if the heavens help them. Even if they didn't kill Meng Liang, the Mengs and the Lus would have an unresolvable grudge. Feng Zhen drummed his fingers on his knee. If Prince Changshu really wants to attack the imperial city of Qinzhou, he'll send at most 20,000 soldiers. If we go around Jiamen Pass, we might still make it. As long as the emperor doesn't fall into Prince Changshu's hands, we still have a chance. Yang Si said. If we want to take action, we must inform the alliance leader. My lord, should we? Jiang Pingji was a decisive person. She made up her mind. Prepare the horse. I'm going to find Su Bei. Before becoming the alliance leader, Su Bei's dreams were beautiful, but reality was much harsher than he had imagined. His head was filled with lawsuits. He felt like he was going deaf after listening to the vassals argue for a day. Finally, he could relax for a while. Someone outside reported that Lu Shi wanted to see him. Hearing that it was Lu Shi, Su Bei couldn't reject him. He could only force himself to be alert. Invite my worthy brother in. Jiang Pingji entered the tent. The two exchanged a few words, then she went straight to the point. Brother Su, you don't look happy. Are you still worried about the alliance? Su Bei let out a long sigh. My worthy brother knows me well. It is indeed because of this. After discussing for a day, we still couldn't decide who should be the vanguard. Jiang Pingji gave him a suggestion. If that's the case, why don't we let each family send out a portion of their troops? That way they won't have anything to say. Those with more troops will send more people. Those with fewer troops will send less. No matter what, we can't just come to Jiamen Pass in a grandiose manner and not fight, right? Su Bei felt much better. His worthy brother was indeed more considerate. He was much better than those who shirked responsibility all day. Of course, he quickly changed his mind. Jiang Pingji said, Brother Su, I have a request that I hope you can agree to. Su Bei's eyelids twitched subconsciously, but he maintained a warm smile on his face. My worthy brother, please speak your mind. Jiang Pingji briefly repeated her and Feng Zhen's conjecture. She wanted to lead her 10,000 troops to attack Jiamen Pass. Su Bei groaned inwardly. It was indeed difficult to be the leader of the alliance. Previously, Yang Jian had made a fuss about withdrawing from the alliance. Now Lu Shi wanted to leave the alliance and go on his own. What was going on? He said, This is only your speculation. There is no concrete evidence to prove that Prince Changshu split his troops to attack the imperial city of Qinzhou. If this is true, it will be a great achievement. But if it isn't, aren't you worried that someone will use this as an excuse to attack you? In my opinion, it's better to give this matter further thought. Why don't you wait a little longer, and I'll send some scouts to investigate. Jiang Pingji was so righteous that she wished she could carve the word justice on her face. This matter is urgent and cannot be delayed. As long as it can ensure the safety of the imperial court, I'm willing to go through fire and water for it. Su Bei didn't show it on his face, but his heart was already conflicted. If you leave midway, how will I explain this to the other feudal lords? Jiang Pingji pursed her lips and stared straight at Su Bei. Su Bei looked back at her silently. The two of them were in a stalemate when a soldier came to report that Yang Jian was requesting an audience. Su Bei was surprised. Why would Yang Jian suddenly visit at this time? Could it be that he couldn't stand the quarrel during the day, and wanted to stir up trouble again? Invite Chief Yang in. Yang Jian had arrived, but he wasn't alone. Behind him was a young scholar in a green bamboo robe, Yin Lin. Jiang Pingji frowned inwardly when she saw this. Chapter 722. As expected, when Yin Lin spoke on behalf of Yang Jian, Jiang Pingji knew what the two were up to. Su Bei was also surprised. He quietly listened to Yin Lin's words and secretly glanced at Jiang Pingji. Did the two groups really not discuss this beforehand? He had every reason to suspect that Yang Jian and Jiang Pingji had teamed up to mess with him. I didn't expect County Chief Yang to have such thoughts. Su Bei adjusted his emotions so that he wouldn't lose his composure. Both of them wanted to leave the organization and wander around. Did they even consider his feelings as the alliance leader? Everything else can be discussed, but this matter is a little difficult. Yin Lin was shocked. He subconsciously looked at Jiang Pingji. Why did the alliance leader say that he had such thoughts? Could it be? Su Bei gave a definite answer. He said, "Before County Chief Yang came, Brother Lanting was talking to me about this." Yin Lin pretended to be calm and smiled. "I didn't expect my lord to have the same thoughts as Magistrate Liu." Jiang Pingji secretly chuckled. Just by looking at Yang Jian's face, she didn't believe that Yang Jian had come up with these ideas. Each of the three parties had their own ideas. For a moment, the tent fell into an eerie silence. The viewers in the streaming room were also burning with anxiety. Unfortunately, they were separated by a dimensional barrier. No matter how anxious they were, it was useless. Heng Xiaoyu. I'm so angry. I want to grab Su Bei by his collar and smash his head open. What is this person so conflicted about? The Fairy Queen's crimson. Sigh, he's the alliance leader. He has to consider many things and weigh the benefits. I have a good impression of Su Bei. But if he keeps obstructing us, I also want to smash his head open for his nonsense. Sheng Shitai. Haha, you all want to smash Su Bei's head open. I feel sorry for him. Seriously, as the alliance leader, he only has a good reputation. He doesn't have much power. The streamer and Yang Jian both wanted to leave the group. Su Bei was also very tired. Mijio. Actually, I'm more interested to know if the streamer will work with Yang Jian's troops. After all, they are all going for the same goal. The streamer doesn't have enough troops. If she works with Yang Jian's troops, they can take care of each other. It should be a win-win situation. Just as the salted fish spectators were having their own discussions, Yang Jian was the first to break the stalemate. Yin Lin's expression was calm as he asked Su Bei, "This matter cannot be delayed any longer. I hope that the alliance head can agree to it as soon as possible." A bitter smile appeared on Su Bei's face as he skillfully and easily played Tai Chi. "I know that you want to be loyal to the country, but nothing can be accomplished without rules. The alliance army's rescue of the king concerns the fate of the country, and I cannot allow you to act recklessly. I must first discuss this with the other vassals." Yin Lin was a little angry. Even though he spoke calmly, there was a hint of mockery in his voice. Discuss with the other feudal vassals? They had been debating for an entire day about who should be the vanguard, but there was no conclusion. If we bring this matter up for discussion, by the time the results are out, I think Prince Changsha would have already been wearing the imperial robe and forced His Majesty to abdicate the throne. Jiang Pingji assisted him from the side. She said, "This is an emergency. Brother Su, why don't you make an exception?" Su Bei's eyelids twitched. How could he make an exception for this matter? If he really allowed Yang Jian and Lu Shi's troops to bypass Gemin Pass, how would he answer to the other feudal vassals when they questioned him? The alliance army was not united to begin with. If something like this were to happen, the alliance army that they had painstakingly gathered together would completely fall apart. There is no room for compromise in this matter. If you are in a hurry, I can summon the feudal vassals right now, but we cannot act on our own. Yin Lin maintained his standard sitting posture. His hands were clenched tightly on his knees. His unwillingness to accept this situation was on the verge of overflowing. Yang Jian's troops had been ostracized and isolated by the feudal vassals the moment they arrived. Now they had to shirk responsibility. It was really frustrating. Jiang Pingji was unhurried. She turned to Su Bei and said, Brother Su, have you ever thought about the alliance's future? Su Bei asked in surprise. What do you mean, brother? Jiang Pingji smiled. The alliance army has been ordered to rescue the king. It is only right and proper for us to follow orders and punish rebels. However, there is a precondition. The person sitting on the throne must be the current emperor. If it's someone else, if it's Prince Changsho, at that time, we'll be traitors. Su Bei's eyelids twitched. If the alliance army was labeled as rebels, Su Bei, as the leader of the alliance, would be the first to bear the brunt of the blame. However, the alliance army had 400,000 troops. Even if Prince Changsho took the throne, he would not dare to act forcefully. At most, he would sow discord among them. If we can save the royal family and nobles in Qinzhou, and ensure the emperor's safety, it will all be due to Brother Su's meritorious command. Chief Yang and I will only take credit for running errands. Even if we can't save them, with Brother Su's family background and resources, you can easily escape. Su Bei agreed with this statement in his heart, but on the surface, he acted as if he had been insulted. Brother, in your eyes, am I such a hypocritical and pretentious scoundrel? Jiang Pingji was not surprised by Su Bei's reaction. She said, Of course I know Brother Su is not such a person, but I am worried. Seeing the feudal vassals at the alliance meeting wrangle all day and do nothing proper, I am afraid that they will tarnish Brother Su's good reputation. The people of the world will not investigate how greedy and cowardly these feudal vassals are. They will only think that the alliance leader is indecisive and incompetent. Brother Su, please reconsider. She was not good at other things, but she definitely knew how to grasp the weaknesses of others. Su Bei's weaknesses were reputation, prestige, and meritorious service. The right medicine would be effective quickly. Yan Lin lowered his eyes and listened, as if the things around him had nothing to do with him. However, he was very clear that Su Bei had been persuaded by Jiang Pingji. As expected, Su Bei's expression changed drastically. After struggling for a while, he said, Brother, you only have 10,000 men under your command. If you are not careful and encounter Prince Changsho's elite troops, you will be in danger. This won't do. How can I put you in danger? Jiang Pingji smiled. It's fine. Don't we still have Chief Yang here? The two armies together have 25,000 men, which should be enough to deal with. Su Bei turned to Yang Jian and the others, using his eyes to ask for their opinion. Yan Lin agreed. I will listen to the alliance leader's command. Su Bei slammed his hand on the table, feeling a surge of heroism. He finally relented and agreed to this matter. As for the other feudal vassals, he would think of a way to deal with them. After leaving the tent, Yan Lin snorted coldly. District Magistrate Liu, you are so generous. Jiang Pingji smiled and asked in return, Why do you say so, sir? We have sacrificed our lives and shed our blood at the front lines. But in the end, we give all the benefits to Su Bei. Isn't that generous? Jiang Pingji shrugged her shoulders. If you don't sacrifice your children, you won't be able to catch the wolf. Meritorious service is an empty thing. Only the benefits that are in your hands are real. If they did not use meritorious service to bribe Su Bei, he would never let them go. Yan Lin understood this logic, but he still felt a little disgusted. Since we are fated to work together, why don't we gather the strength of our two families and discuss this together? Chapter 723. Jiang Pingji teased him with a smile. You don't sound very willing. Yan Lin didn't utter a word. He just stared at her for a long time with his jet-black eyes. He had been completely represented by an irrelevant person, and at the same time, he had lost a part of the benefits that he could easily reap. No one would be happy about that. Jiang Pingji was aware of his resentment. A sly smile flashed across her bright eyes. She shamelessly joked with him shamelessly. I know you have resentment in your heart, but when it comes to haggling over it, you should thank me. If it weren't for me, Su Bei wouldn't have let them go so easily. He didn't have to do anything. All he had to do was stall for 3 to 5 days. Then it would be too late. Even though Chief Yang had caused a ruckus earlier, which made the other feudal lords wary of him, it wouldn't last long. Jiamen Pass hadn't been conquered for a long time, so someone had to be the scapegoat. Among all the feudal lords, is there anyone more suitable than your lord? It wasn't easy enough to leave this troublesome place. Yan Lin's face darkened. He turned his head away from the annoying smile on the man's face. It was Jiang Pingji who had set them up. But in her mouth, she made it sound like Yang Jian and Yan Lin were grateful to her. His ability to invert right and wrong was already at the pinnacle of perfection. This person isn't simple. After parting ways, both parties went back to reorganize their troops. Yan Lin, who had been silent for a long time, spoke for the first time. Yang Jian said, "Dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and mice give birth to children who know how to dig holes. How could Lu Shi's son be a good person? I just didn't expect Lu Shi to not only be good at fighting, but also be so eloquent. Now that I think about Jingza, it's really worrying." In Yang Jian's eyes, Jiang Pingji was a typical other people's child. Yang Tao, his own child, always made him worry. Hearing Yang Jian talk about his son, Yan Lin couldn't help but feel wronged for his best friend. Jingza has a good temper, and he's passionate and loyal. He's much better than someone with a dark heart. Even if his best friend was a retard, Yan Lin still felt that the naughty kid's best friend was a better person. Yang Jian laughed bitterly. To put it nicely, it's passionate and loyal. To put it bluntly, it's impulsive and brainless. Fortunately, this kid was fortunate in his previous life to have a good friend like you. With you looking after him for me, I won't have to worry about him being bullied after 100 years. Yang Jian had many children, but he only had one son, and he was the son of his first wife. He loved him even more. Unfortunately, this child had been a one-track mind ever since he was young. He had stirred up a lot of trouble, causing Yang Jian to worry so much that his beard was no longer as smooth as it used to be. Yang Jian heaved a sigh of relief when he met Yan Lin. Yan Lin smiled. The Lord is in his prime. He won't look old in another 30 or 50 years. Yang Jian stroked his beautiful beard. The two of them returned to the camp surrounded by his personal guards. He ordered the troops and horses to be reorganized and things to be packed. There was still some time before they set up camp. Yan Lin went to Jiang Pingji's camp to discuss some matters. Lu Shi and Lu Shi were father and son. Their campsites were very close to each other. When Yan Lin arrived, Lu Shi's campsite was busy tidying up. Lu Shi's campsite was as quiet as ever. He frowned and suppressed his doubts. My father doesn't like fighting and killing. He had no choice but to come to this alliance meeting. Jiang Pingji could tell what he was thinking. She explained with a smile. Using a surprise attack to stop Prince Changshuo's elite troops was too exciting for him, so I didn't want to disturb him. If you don't ask for help from the Lu governor, you only have 10,000 men. Is that enough? Yan Lin asked. Jiang Pingji said, It's enough. Both our families have 25,000 men. If my father's troops were added to the mix, we would be too big of a target. They were planning to launch a surprise attack, and the key was the word surprise. If they were discovered by the enemy, because they were too big of a target, the final result would be greatly reduced. They might even lose their lives. Yan Lin's expression softened a little. That makes sense. Jiamen Pass was located in the middle of a mountain range. The terrain was steep and undulating. It would be very difficult to go around it and enter Qinzhou. However, just because it was difficult didn't mean it was impossible. If we want to go around Jiamen Pass, there are two ways. As the representative of Yang Jian's army, Yan Lin wasn't a pushover. Since he had the guts to come up with this plan, he was naturally well prepared. Even though it was an away battle, he was still full of confidence. The first way is through the water, but the current is fast and dangerous. We have to go against the current. If we aren't good swimmers, we won't be able to cross it. Yang Jian's men were from Zhangzhou's Dongmen County. There were many waters there, and the water was fierce. Every one of them was a natural swimmer. The water route around Jiamen Pass was only moderately difficult for them. However, most of Jiang Pingji's soldiers didn't know how to swim, which was a bit embarrassing. Feng Zhen smiled and pointed at a certain mountain range on the map. The other way should be here, right? Yan Lin said, yes. However, the mountain path is rugged and dangerous. Wild beasts and poisonous insects roam the land. Normal people don't dare to enter, because it's easy to get lost. In other words, if Jiang Pingji wanted to stop Prince Changshuo, She had to choose between these two ways. If she felt that it was too dangerous and didn't want to take the risk, she could choose to take the longer route. However, it would take a lot of time, and she might even run into Prince Changsho's scouts. The two ways Yin Lin chose were both the shortest. If they walked normally, they would be able to get around Jiamen Pass in one night. Jiang Pingji smiled and made the decision. Deal. Let's set a time and place. We'll wait for you there. As soon as she said this, Yin Lin's expression turned into one of shock. The live stream room was flooded with comments of 666 for her domineering words. Liuli Huoyu. My streamer is still as domineering as ever. Not climbing koala. What did the streamer do this time? Why are you guys giving her so many comments? Cha Yuanfei. Hey, can't you tell? I remember the streamer said that Yang Jian's men were all good swimmers, so they would definitely choose the water route. They were so confident. The streamer's men can't swim, so they could only choose the mountain path. The mountain path was rugged and more exhausting. Looking at the map, the distance was longer than the water route. But the streamer said they would wait for Yang Jian's men. Isn't that domineering? Saipu. Well, I can say that it's domineering, but it's even more annoying. Didn't you see that Yin Lin's eyes were about to spit fire? No one would be able to maintain 100% composure when encountering such a chinibyu like the host. Not to mention Jiang Pengji's enemies, even the people around her couldn't keep their master's mocking face. Deal. Since the district magistrate is so confident, let's meet up here. Yin Lin pointed at a spot on the map and his smile returned. Chapter 724. The pitch-black sky was like thick black ink. Only a little moonlight shone on the ground. Jiang Pingji's troops were ready to depart. They quietly left the camp under the cover of the night. Yang Jian's situation was similar. The other feudal vassals were still living in a drunken stupor, continuing their tradition of enjoyment. There was no sign of the incessant quarrels they had during the day. Before Jiang Pingji left, she informed Lu Shi. He sent people to help cover up the two camps, so that no one would find out that the two camps were empty. The weather is so cold, and it's so dark that you can't even see your fingers in front of you. Yang Jian and his men are crossing the river against the current. Feng Zhen was wrapped in thick clothes, and had a brand new hot water bottle in his arms. Even so, he still felt cold. He couldn't imagine how Yang Jian's troops could cross the river against the current. No matter how good they were at swimming, it would be difficult to protect their lives against the rapid and cold water. Thinking about stripping off their clothes and jumping into the water, going against the current, Feng Zhen's small body couldn't help but shiver. His lips turned even whiter. Jiang Pingji smiled. She said, "Who told you that they have to jump into the water?" Huh. Feng Zhen was surprised. But didn't Yang Jian and his men choose the waterway? If they cross the river by boat, they don't have enough boats. They don't have many soldiers, but they still have 15,000 men. How can they cross the river smoothly? Is it possible that Yang Jian has a trick up his sleeve? Jiang Pingji smiled but didn't say anything. She said, "Anyway, they can cross the river smoothly. We have to work harder here." Chenzhou was considered to be in the south. No matter how steep the mountains were, they had a limit. However, the mountains were surrounded by mountains. Without a guide with a good sense of direction, it was easy to get lost. Fortunately, it's still the cold season. If it were spring or summer, the miasma in the mountains, wild beasts, snakes, insects, and rats would be enough to make our army suffer. To make it easier for the troops to march and lighten their load, Meng Hun took off half of his armor. He only covered his vital parts. It's cold now, so it's easier. If it were daytime, it would be even better. At least we wouldn't be unable to see the road. Marching at night was prone to trouble. Because of the lack of nutrition, many soldiers had night blindness, and their vision was impaired. Even though Jiang Pingji had greatly improved the food in the military camp and distributed torches in groups of 50, marching was still very difficult. Jiang Pingji adjusted her strategy. She let the soldiers who were strong and had good eyesight and hearing to clear a path in front. The soldiers who had weaker eyesight and physical strength were in the middle and back. If the soldiers clearing the path got tired, Another team would take their place to ensure that they advanced at a constant speed. If it were during the day, we wouldn't be able to hide our movements from the other vassal forces. Li Yin and Dian Yen were at the front of the troops. The silver spear that was supposed to be used to reap the lives of the enemies had now become a walking stick for him to test the road ahead. Surprisingly, he did not feel any heartache. As long as we hide it from Prince Changsho's eyes and ears, I'm afraid they won't be able to guess that we actually dared to take an unorthodox path and bypass Gemin Pass. The road was too rugged. Yang Si and Feng Zhen had already dismounted from their horses and were walking. Before long, they were panting and sweating profusely. Li Yin turned to Yang Si and said, "Are you tired, teacher? How about I carry you on my back?" Yang Si was still reserved. After all, Li Yin was the general leading the charge. He had to conserve his strength. The road was so rugged that he was already exhausted after walking for a while. If Li Yin carried him on his back, wouldn't he die of exhaustion? Therefore he chose to refuse. However, someone else was much more thick-skinned than him. Feng Zhen said, "Han Mei, you're being biased. I'm tired too. Why don't you carry me on your back?" Li Yin blinked innocently, then repeated obediently, "Are you tired, teacher? How about I carry you on my back?" Feng Zhen immediately nodded vigorously. Yes, yes, yes." Jiang Pingji hesitated for a while and said, "Check who is making a fuss?" Feng Zhen was surprised. What did she mean? Yang Si snorted and mocked. "I said you're shameless." Looking at the two strategists who were about to start a fight, Li Yin could only watch anxiously from the side. "Just carry him on your back. Do you want to give them time to quarrel?" Jiang Pingji walked past Li Yin and raised her hand to pat his shoulder. "Sigh. The combined age of the two of them is almost 60. Don't you find it embarrassing that you're still so noisy?" Li Yin's strength was his sincerity. Jiang Pingji asked him to carry Li Yin on his back, and he really did. Yang Si was speechless. Once again, this group of people was poisonous. Although it was late at night, the cultivators in the streaming room were still full of energy. They watched the farce with a smile. "Huazhuazhua. Haha, Li Yin and Feng Zhen, I'm in love with this sweet CP. Fei Xianglong. You fickle fairies. Just a while ago, you were in love with Yang Si and Feng Zhen. You've changed your mind so quickly. Qieshan Douyin. That won't do. Streamer, you'd better hurry up and introduce all kinds of girls. You have a bunch of men under you. Aren't you afraid that they'll fall in love with each other? For example, you can't let a rich son-in-law like brother Li Yin fall in love." Jiang Pingji looked at the screen full of bullet screens and was speechless. She planned to poison the viewers in the streaming room. "Han Mei, what's the matter, my lord?" Jiang Pingji asked. "How are you and Wan'er?" What? Whether it was the strategists or the 150,000 spectators, they all pricked up their ears. There was gossip. Li Yin's eyes darted around, and his cheeks flushed red. "Lady Wan is doing well. Why did my lord suddenly mention this?" As soon as he said that, the bullet screens in the streaming room turned into jeering. Oh. Lady Wan? Isn't that the leader of the women's department in the government office? Han Mei had taught her martial arts. Could it be that they hooked up at that time? There aren't many talented unmarried ladies in Wanzhou. While she's unclaimed, it's better to pluck her as soon as possible, lest someone covets her. Li Yin smiled bitterly. "Sir, we're not even close yet." Feng Zhen lay on Li Yin's back and raised his hand to pat his head. "If there's no close yet, why don't you take a pen and write it down?" Yang Si smiled and shook his head. "That's rare. Maybe in a few months, Wanzhou will be able to hold a proper wedding." The ratio of married and unmarried people under Jiang Pingji was basically the same. Yang Si was considered old and unmarried, but he had very high standards. He would rather sleep with women than find a mistress for his backyard. Ever since Feng Zhen beat his wife to death, he became a widower in peace. He was also in the red light district having fun day and night. Of course, nowadays he was either busy with government affairs or war. He didn't even have time to look for the fifth young lady, let alone a young lady. Jiang Pingji jeered. "When the time comes, I'll give you a few more months of salary in advance. Han Mei, the gift money you receive will be the same as their salary." How could Li Yin be a match for the teasing of a few trusted people? In a short while he was so embarrassed that he didn't know how to walk. Listening to their teasing, Li Yin wanted to dig a hole in the ground. Chapter 725. The mountain road was rugged and difficult to navigate. It was easy to get lost. However, under Jiang Pingji's command, these problems were not a problem at all. The difficulties they encountered were much easier than expected. On the other side, Yang Jian's troops had also come prepared. They had experienced much more dangerous rapids. This was not a big challenge for a group of swimmers. Xiaoyang, can you still hold on? Yang Tao was breathing heavily. His face was no longer immature, but it was filled with the vigor and determination of a young man. Compared to Yang Tao's roughness and casualness, Yin Lin maintained his calm and reserved demeanor. I'm fine. Zhengzi, go ahead and take care of the Lord. His arrow wound has not healed yet, so he needs to be careful. Yin Lin did not approve of Yang Jian's participation in this surprise attack, but Yang Jian was worried about his retarded son, and did not dare let him lead the troops alone. Yang Tao nodded. Xiaoyang, you be careful too. Although the river was flowing fast, it was winter. The current was lower than when the tide was high, so the slope on both sides was exposed. The slope was gentle, so it could be used to reduce the difficulty. This was also one of the trump cards that allowed Yin Lin to reach the destination before Jiang Pingji did. One took the water route, and the other took the mountain route. Both hurried on without a word. The Alliance's camp in front of Jiamen Pass was still bustling with noise, until a ray of white light dispelled the darkness in the sky. The sky turned from dark to gray, then from gray to light. Each of the feudal lords had their own agenda. With Lu Shi's help, no one realized that the Alliance had lost 25,000 men. However, they could hide it for a while, but they could not hide it forever. 2 camps with a total of 25,000 men were missing. Even the slowest person would notice something was wrong. The funny thing was, when they found out, it was already dusk the next day. Upon receiving this news, all the clans were shocked. And Shui had secretly joined the Hu County chief, Wuma Shang, to get some benefits. When Shui heard the news, he saw Wuma Shang's sinister smile. This Lu Shi is just so, a coward who ran away from battle. Lu Zhongqing must be crying his eyes out to have such a son. Wuma Shang snorted. Although he had no conflict with Jiang Pingji, he still hated the Lu father and son. Chongzhou, Wanzhou, and Hu County were all in the hands of the Lu father and son. As a member of the royal family, how could he stand it? Did the world belong to the Wuma family, or the Lu family? And Shui said in a low voice, Lu Shi is not that kind of cowardly person. He would never run away in the face of battle. There must be some secret that we don't know about since he left in the middle of the night. Alliance head Su Bei should know about it. The prefectural governor can go and ask about it. Wuma Shang snorted disdainfully. Although he said that he did not care about others, he was still very afraid of them. Okay, let's go. On the other side, Huang Song also received the news at the same time. He didn't have much of a relationship with Yang Jian, so it wasn't easy for him to make a judgment. However, he had a certain understanding of Jiang Pingji and knew her temperament. Even if there were rumors outside that the two of them had fled at the last moment, Huang Song did not think so. There must be an inside story for the two forces to leave overnight. Feng Zhu and Cheng Jing looked at each other. They knew what was going on. Feng Zhu and Cheng Jing looked at each other, as if they had a tacit understanding of each other. They realized the crux of the matter, and secretly realized that something was wrong. By the time Huang Song and the others arrived, the tent was already filled with people who had heard the news. They were not there to ask about the whereabouts of Yang Jian and Jiang Pingji's troops. They just wanted to watch Su Bei's show. They weren't there to ask about the whereabouts of Yang Jian and Jiang Pingji's troops. They were just there to watch Su Bei's show. Su Fei laughed. Big brother, you are not doing your job as the alliance leader. Someone came and went as he pleased. Su Bei glanced at him. There was no sign of panic or anger on his face. Instead, he was calm and composed. Who told you this? Su Bei glanced at him. There was no trace of panic or anger on his face. Instead, he was calm and composed. Who told you this news? As for what they were doing, I cannot tell you for now to prevent secrets from being leaked. Su Fei snorted coldly. He did not believe this excuse at all. He thought Su Bei was guilty. Su Bei kept a straight face, his eyes filled with disdain. Everyone, your first task is to break through Gemin Pass. Nothing else is important. Su Bei's face was stern, and his eyes were filled with disdain. Everyone, your primary mission is to break through the Gemin Pass. Everything else is unimportant. Lanting and Commandant Yang only had 25,000 soldiers, less than 10% of the Allied forces. Is it impossible to conquer Gemin Pass without them? Alliance Master, you misunderstand. Su Fei's tone was sarcastic, and his eyes were full of provocation. Without them, the Alliance will naturally be able to conquer Gemin Pass. However, as a member of the Alliance, he acted on his own. Did he take the Alliance leader seriously? With their actions, how could the Alliance's morale be united? Similarly, as the leader of the Alliance, you are also responsible for neglecting your duties. The tent was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Su Bei had said that Jiang Pingji and the others were being dispatched in secret, and that the other details could not be made public. Su Fei insisted that this was Su Bei's excuse. Enough. Suddenly, a voice that was like ice jade was transmitted from outside the tent into the tent. Lu Shi, dressed in a scholarly robe, and with a heavy cloak draped over his shoulders, strode in. His eyes were cold, and his stern expression made it impossible for anyone to make a sound. If everyone is curious, then wait for half a month. There will naturally be news of victory. Su Fei was a little afraid of Lu Shi's authority, but he was not afraid of death. Of course, as a father, I have to take care of the aftermath for my son. What if there is no news of victory in half a month? If there was no news of victory in half a month, it meant that Lu Shi's ambush had failed. He did not achieve the desired result, and he might even be killed by Prince Changshuo's army. His life would be in danger. Su Bei secretly signaled for Su Fei to shut up, but the kid continued to provoke him. If there is no news of victory, I will break through Gemin Pass. Lu Shi said calmly. The son was arrogant, but the father was no different. Everyone was a little confused at first, but when they realized what was going on, they all glared at him. Lu Zhongqing, do you mean that we will not be able to break through Gemin Pass in half a month? Lu Shi's lips curled into a mocking smile. It's good that you know your limits. You. Su Fei slammed his palm on the table. He was so angry that his hands were shaking. Lu Shi didn't even pay attention to him. He flicked his sleeves and left. Until the end, Su Bei still did not reveal the whereabouts of Lu Shi and Yang Jian's troops. Who knew if there were spies from Prince Changshuo among the Alliance's troops? In short, Su Bei would not easily reveal anything that was related to the military secrets. However, even if he didn't say anything, there would still be people who would be able to figure out the truth. What a bold move. Cheng Jing lowered his eyes. But this person relies too much on crafty tactics. Feng Zhu was mentally prepared for this. After all, he and Jiang Pingji were old friends. Chapter 726. Cheng Jing frowned slightly. His jade-like eyes glinted. Since Governor Lu is willing to back Lu Shi up, he must have safely bypassed Gemin Pass by now. Feng Zhu smiled. We think alike. They were right. After a night of running and climbing, Jiang Pingji finally led the army past Gemin Pass and into Qinzhou. The morning light was bright and blinding. Jiang Pingji rubbed her eyelids, which she hadn't slept all night, to get rid of the soreness in her eyes. Let's settle the soldiers down and rest for a while. Eat some rations to replenish our energy and spirit. Feng Zhen rubbed his shoulders. He had fallen asleep on Li Yun's back in the middle of the night, but he hadn't slept well. His eyes had turned green. My lord, why don't you compete with Yang Jian to see who will arrive first? Jiang Pingji glared at Feng Zhen impatiently. In the end, is this kind of personal conflict more important, or is the soldiers more important? I was just saying that to piss them off. After a night of running, even with Jiang Pingji's coordination to ensure that they were on the right path, and didn't take any detours, the soldiers were still exhausted. Jiang Pingji didn't want them to continue with this kind of exhaustion. She would rather spend more time resting. Thank you for your consideration, my lord. Feng Zhen smiled and cupped his hands. He had a sly smile on his face. Jiang Pingji didn't know what to say. The army rested and reorganized. Although they couldn't light a fire to cook, they had already prepared some dry rations before they left. They made a lot of rice balls that could be used as dry rations. The rice balls were also wrapped with a lot of finely sliced pickled vegetables. Together with the water in the water bag, it could barely be considered as a breakfast. The soldiers were fed like this, so Jiang Pingji didn't treat them any differently. It's still warm. I thought I would eat rice balls that were as cold as ice. The rice balls prepared by Li Yun were wrapped in several layers of cloth and stuffed into the inner layer of his armor. They were still warm when taken out. Eating the rice balls directly was dry and tasteless, so Jiang Pingji had someone add shredded pickled vegetables inside. It tasted a little salty in the mouth. It was good enough that the army could have such conditions in battle. No one complained, but the viewers in the streaming room felt sorry for them. Li Wushuang. My baby Yangxi is the most picky eater. Now that the conditions are tough, even the rice balls are so delicious. Fengxing Shuiqi, same. Looking at the live broadcast, I suddenly feel that the lobster feast in front of me is tasteless. Xianyuan Mingjing. Haha, the person above me is poisonous. Did he really feel sorry for her? Or did he deliberately poison her? Jiang Pingji deliberately did not look at the bullet screen in the streaming room. According to her understanding of the audience, they must be posting all kinds of delicacies. She wouldn't go looking for trouble. Everyone ate until they were 70 to 80% full, and then rested for 4 hours. The sun had already risen high above their heads. It's almost time. Let's go and meet up, Jiang Pingji said. The rendezvous point was only an hour's walk away. Jiang Pingji was not in a hurry. She tried her best to take care of the soldiers. When they arrived, Yang Jian's troops were already resting at their destination. Yan Lin was surprised to see them. According to his conjecture, even if they didn't get lost, they would have to take some detours. They wouldn't be able to make it in time. In the end, they arrived at their destination. Yan Lin's gaze fell on the soldiers' faces. Although they were tired, they didn't look like they hadn't rested for more than a dozen hours. In other words, they must have rested halfway through the journey. If they hadn't rested, they might have arrived earlier than they did. Thinking about this, Yan Lin didn't dare to underestimate them anymore. He paid more attention to Jiang Pingji. Since the two families were working together, they had to share some information. In Qinzhou, other than the power of the court, there was also the power of Prince Changshou. If the two families wanted to stop Prince Changshou's power, not only would they have to be fast, but they would also have to make sure that their information was not leaked. Otherwise, if the enemy was prepared, it would be difficult for them to achieve the desired result. How could they ensure that their tracks were not leaked? Of course, they had to plan the best route to avoid possible spies. And at the same time, they had to make sure that they didn't waste any time. The conditions were simple, so the two families found a random place and gathered together to discuss. Yang Jian and his son had never had a say in such things. They didn't mind letting Yan Lin have full control of the situation. On Jiang Pingji's side, the generals had their own tasks. They trusted the military counselor and their lord's experience, so they didn't interrupt. At that moment, Yan Lin realized that Lu Shi was very different from the other lords. Usually, the lords would wait for the strategists to discuss before making a decision. Jiang Pingji, on the other hand, was directly involved in the discussion. She wasn't pretending to understand. Seeing this, Yang Jian sighed even harder. When comparing goods, you have to throw them away. When comparing people, you have to die. If his son didn't have to worry half as much as Lu Shi, he would be very happy. If it weren't for Yan Lin, Yang Jian would often have the urge to shove the kid back into the furnace and remake him. They had already come up with a plan, but the alliance only realized that the two forces had disappeared. Lu Shi had mocked the alliance for not being able to take Gemin Pass. They didn't believe him, so they insisted on taking it down for Lu Shi to see. Then, they were slapped in the face by the defending generals of Gemin Pass. The first battle lasted more than 2 hours, and they lost more than 2,000 corpses. They had no choice but to retreat. Seeing this, everyone's faces turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Su Bei sat in the seat of honor, listening to the dukes passing the buck. He felt like his brain was about to explode. After dealing with these people with great difficulty, Su Bei went to Lu Shi that very night. He wanted to secretly ask for advice on how to break through the pass. Lu Shi's answer left Su Bei speechless. He said, "I had no choice. You asked me to govern a state and a county. I don't think I'm weaker than anyone else, but it's difficult to command a battle." Su Bei was so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth. If Lu Shi didn't have a brilliant plan to break through the pass, then why did he boast during the day? He didn't ask, but his face clearly said, "Are you kidding me?" Lu Shi was speechless. Lu Shi said sternly, "If I didn't say that, those people would have continued to attack the alliance leader in Lanting. How could I bear to watch that?" In short, he had to say something, acting cool for a while, but dealing with the aftermath was the crematorium. Su Bei was speechless. "If there's no news of victory in half a month, how will you deal with it, Governor Liu?" What he said was like spilled water. If he wasn't careful, he would be slapped in the face. If he was slapped in the face, how would he keep his dignity as a governor? Lu Shi secretly rolled his eyes and said, "In half a month, the Alliance's 400,000 soldiers should be able to break through Jiamen Pass. I said that they're useless. Are they really willing to give up? Even if we take 10,000 steps back and say that we can't break through Jiamen Pass, I still have faith in my Lanting. There will definitely be news of victory in half a month. If we fail on both of these points, we'll think of another way. I'm not in a hurry." Su Bei was speechless. "You're not in a hurry, but he is." Chapter 727. 11 days passed in the blink of an eye. The alliance finally broke through Jiamen Pass. That night, they celebrated with dancing and singing. Seeing this, Huang Song and a few of his trusted advisors sighed. Those idiots. It took them 11 days to break through Jiamen Pass. I don't know what to celebrate. Huang Song was so angry that he pounded the table. The music from outside drifted in and drilled into his ears, causing him to be upset. Feng Ju and the others looked at each other and smiled bitterly. What was the difference between the alliance and the mud? Tomorrow, the army will leave for Jiamen Pass. I just hope we can make it in time. Feng Ju sighed. Cheng Jing lowered his eyes and said coldly, "How can we make it in time? I'm afraid the imperial city of Chenzhou is already in danger. Damn it, these short-sighted people are still so smug. Who would dare to admit that they're greedy? Now we can only pin our hopes on Lu Shi and Yang Jian, and hope they can be fast enough. Even if we can't save the imperial city, we have to save His Majesty." Because the 5 kingdoms had only been established for a short period of time, coupled with the education of the aristocratic families, the scholars were not very loyal to the country. Cheng Jing and Feng Ju were typical examples. To them, the imperial family would be destroyed sooner or later, but not now. The emperor of Dongqing was still around, and he could still control some forces. If the emperor was gone, the whole of Dongqing would be ruled by feudal lords. As for Huang Song, he needed to lay low and develop further. He couldn't live without the emperor. Feng Ju sneered and said with obvious sarcasm, "I hope so. God bless Dongqing." But God wasn't on Dongqing's side. The fate of the country was almost exhausted. No matter how hard they tried, they could only struggle on. On the second day after the alliance broke through Jiamen Pass, they passed through the pass in high spirits. The imperial city of Chenzhou was in danger. Ever since they moved the capital to Chenzhou, the emperor had planned to build the imperial city into another Shangjing. However, the national treasury was empty, and Prince Changsho had taken the opportunity to interfere. Most of the silver had to be invested in the army. Because there wasn't enough money for construction, the emperor and his concubines had to live in the temporary palace in Chenzhou. Although it was a temporary imperial residence, it was no less luxurious than the imperial palace in Shangjing. The emperor and his concubines could still live a befuddled and luxurious life. The emperor did not need to care about the war outside. He only cared about his own enjoyment. He embraced beauties, drank wine, and enjoyed himself. A luxurious life required the support of money. But how could he raise enough money for his extravagant spending? The emperor simply moved the secret practice of selling official positions and titles to the surface. Every official title was clearly marked at a price. The emperor's table manners were ugly and shameful to the aristocrats. The emperor had 3,000 beauties by his side, but the one he doted on the most was the former imperial noble consort, the current Empress Huijun. When talking about the Empress, many officials were filled with love and hate, gnashing their teeth in anger. Why was it a love-hate relationship? Because as long as she was present, the emperor's violent nature would be greatly restrained, and he would not easily draw his sword to kill. Many officials were about to be executed by the emperor. It was all thanks to Empress Huijun's plea that their entire families were spared from the death penalty. Logically speaking, the officials had more or less received the empress' kindness, so why did they still hate her? When Empress Huijun was still the imperial noble consort, she plotted to murder the previous empress and seduce the crown prince, causing the relationship between the emperor and the crown prince to fall apart. The father and son turned against each other, and the crown prince's entire family was stripped of their status, demoted to commoners, and died miserably. As for the crown prince himself, he was beheaded by the furious emperor, and he died with his eyes wide open. Not only was the crown prince murdered by Huijun, but the second prince, the third prince, and the fourth prince, Wuma Jun, were also murdered. The second prince was found to have used witchcraft to murder the emperor and Empress Huijun. His house was confiscated, and he was killed. His mother's family was not spared. The third prince's presence was very weak, but his status was the most honorable. His mother was from a side branch of the Feng family, but she was found to have seduced his concubine's mother, caused chaos in the palace, and had sex with the emperor's new favorite beauty in public. As a result, she was stripped of her status and demoted to a commoner. As for the fourth prince, Wuma Jun, he did not end up well either. One day, he ran out of his mansion in a drunken fit and passed out on the side of the road. His legs were crushed by a few passing carriages, and he was now a cripple. Many imperial censors investigated and pointed the finger at Empress Huijun. But the emperor was deeply infatuated with her and did not listen to them at all. The court was in chaos, and everyone was panicking. The Meng family of Zhangzhou changed sides overnight. Prince Changshu, who was originally in a state of decline, made a comeback and defeated the Qinzhou army. The emperor drank until he was drunk, and Huijun spent all day with him. All the ministers who came to see him ate and went into seclusion. Huijun was now seductive to the bone. She seemed angry and resentful, and her eyes were full of charm. She said to the emperor, "Your Majesty, they are shouting outside again. Day after day, it's so annoying. If Juner doesn't like it, find a small eunuch and kick them out." The emperor touched Huijun's delicate, boneless hand with intoxicated eyes. At the mention of those noisy imperial censors, he felt a wave of irritation. Bad news came from the front line every day. It was fine if those ministers could not share his burdens, but they liked to meddle in the affairs of his backyard. So he still liked to stay at Huijun's place. As long as he enjoyed her body, listened to her gentle voice, and enjoyed that moment of pleasure, he would be willing to die. How could he care about those officials outside who were babbling nonsense? Huijun smiled. It was not an exaggeration to say that her smile could topple a city. "Your Majesty, you'd better go out and take a look. If you continue to stay here, I'm afraid the ministers will criticize me again." The more magnanimous she was, the more the emperor hated the ministers. The emperor's eyes were fierce. I won't go. Let them kneel outside until they die. Both of them are useless. They can't share my burdens, and they make things difficult for me everywhere. If it wasn't for Juner's pleas, they would have been beheaded long ago. Would they still be making noise outside? Huijun said considerately. As the person who sleeps beside your Majesty, how can I not understand the troubles in your Majesty's heart? It's just that all the ministers are the pillars of the country. If something happens to them kneeling outside the palace, it will be one more crime to frame me. Alas, the emperor felt sorry for her and wrapped his hands around her soft hands. His heart was full of relief. They misunderstood Juner so much, but Juner still pleads for them everywhere. Unfortunately, the people outside are a group of ungrateful ingrates. How can they deserve Juner's protection? The emperor frowned in his heart. He was increasingly disgusted with those ignorant ministers. Junior is still the best. Chapter 728. The emperor raised his hand to stop her. I believe you. Ignore the others. I've raised those unfilial sons for nothing. They're all animals who want to kill me. Those vermin who tried to kill their father and usurp the throne deserve to die. The ministers thought that Huijun had instigated the fall of the princes, and even the death of the crown prince. But in reality, Huijun did get involved, but she was just taking advantage of the situation. At most, she was a catalyst and an accomplice. She wasn't the real mastermind. Who was the real mastermind? It was the emperor in front of them. Junior's body is comparable to the elixirs of immortals. It makes my body lighter and younger, the emperor said obsessively. We're still so young. We can have 8 or 10 children in the future, and teach them well. They'll definitely be better than those bastards. Why did the emperor want to kill his sons? First, the princes were young and strong. They coveted the throne, but the emperor was gradually weakening. He was just not satisfied. Second, under Huijun's deliberate provocation and schemes, the princes already had the intention to rebel. The emperor didn't have to be lenient to kill them. For an emperor, which was more important, the throne and his own life? Needless to say, the throne and his life were more important. With the throne and his life, his body was getting younger and younger. As long as he had a woman, anyone could give him countless sons. Rather than saying that Huijun had plotted against the princes, it was more accurate to say that the emperor had made Huijun the scapegoat and used her to kill his sons. Your Majesty, Huijun nodded shyly, seeming to be angry but not angry. When the emperor saw this, he laughed from the bottom of his heart and easily picked up the beauty. The two of them rolled into a ball on the dragon couch. The interweaving breathing created an atmosphere that made one's face and ears red. Their clothes were in tatters and fragrant sweat continuously. Another day passed. An elite army of more than 20,000 soldiers descended from the sky and surrounded the imperial city of Chenzhou, which had been emptied of soldiers. War raged inside and outside the city. The common people ran in fear. Everyone was at a loss. The ministers and nobles packed up their belongings and prepared to escape with their wives and children. Inside the palace, the eunuchs walked hurriedly with panicked expressions. Some people took advantage of the chaos to steal and escape the imperial city. Inside the imperial harem, the concubines and beauties were panicking. One by one, they scrambled to steal gold, silver, jewelry, and clothes. Everyone was panicking, except for 2 people. The emperor breathed heavily and raged at the officials and the messenger. He was so angry that his chest hurt, and his face was slightly green. The whole of Dongqing was his territory, but the rebels and traitors outside wanted to invade. They wanted the life of the emperor. The other person was the current Empress Huijun. She sat quietly on an exquisite couch, and the palace maids serving her were quickly packing up. Empress, is there anything else you want to bring? The personal palace maid asked her. Huijun was playing with a dagger embedded with all sorts of resplendent gems. When she pulled it out, the blade was suffused with a cold white light. She looked into the distance and said with a smile, I don't need any jewelry. Just do as you see fit. The palace maids looked at the Empress every day and felt that she was a celestial being. Now that they looked at her again, they felt that the Empress' smile was less bewitching and more pure and innocent. It was even more shocking. The palace maids returned to their senses and continued to tidy up the treasures in the Empress' palace. Huijun looked down at the dagger and snapped it shut. Then she hid the dagger in her sleeve and tied it to her arm. Dog Emperor. If it wasn't for this dog emperor, she would have a gentle and kind father and a beautiful and virtuous mother. She would have been their treasure. However, because of this dog emperor, her father was killed, and her mother was sent to the palace to serve a strange man while she was pregnant. After the robbery, why did he throw her mother and her into a poorhouse in Shangjing and make them lowly prostitutes? He broke up her family and destroyed her entire life. She wanted to cut off this man's descendants and destroy her family. Huijun snorted coldly and made up her mind. The emperor wanted to escape, but he didn't forget about Huijun. When Huijun was taken away by the palanquin, her ears were filled with the cries and sobs of the concubines and beauties, because they had been heartlessly abandoned by the emperor. What would happen to the concubines of the emperor once they were captured by the rebel army? Huijun didn't have the heart to think about it. She wanted to pity these women, but in the end, she tragically realized that she no longer had that kind of mercy. "Juner, why do you look so terrible?" the emperor asked as he held her hand. Huijun said expressionlessly, "I saw those sisters on the way, but they—" The emperor interrupted Huijun. "Those women are short-sighted and of lowly birth. Why are you sad for them, Jun?" Huijun's heart turned cold. Those women were all women that the emperor had recruited into the palace through various means, but now he had abandoned them like a pair of worn-out shoes. She said, "I was just feeling sentimental for a moment. Things just grieve for their own kind." The emperor hugged her and gently comforted her. "Juner, don't worry. I will never let you down. I will definitely protect your safety." Huijun nestled in his arms and revealed a blissful smile. However, her eyes were still cold, without a hint of a smile. The emperor and the ministers sneaked out of the city, under the protection of the imperial guards. After all, Prince Changshuo's elite army only had about 20,000 men. It was impossible for them to surround the entire imperial city. Unfortunately, their whereabouts were still exposed after 2 days, and the enemy caught up again. The army that caught up with the emperor was the vanguard of the cavalry. More than 10,000 imperial guards were solemnly waiting in formation against the enemy. Outside, there were the sounds of killing and screams. The emperor's face was pale. He could only obtain some peace by holding Huijun's hand tightly. "Your Majesty, you are the true son of heaven. You will definitely be safe." The emperor patted Huijun's hand, and his pale face softened slightly. At first, the imperial guards were still able to resist the attack of the cavalry vanguard. However, as the number of enemy reinforcements increased, the imperial guards gradually lost their strength. The defensive line was broken, and there were heavy casualties. Not only were there the screams of the soldiers outside, but there were also the screams of the ministers' families. The emperor's face gradually turned from pale to green, until a head flew into the dragon carriage. "Your Majesty, the reinforcements of the rebel army are coming. We can't hold them off anymore." The emperor could not sit still anymore. He asked the eunuch to prepare ordinary clothes for him, and planned to let the men of sacrifice protect him to break out of the encirclement. However, if that was the case, Empress Huijun would not be able to take him away. His eyes turned cold, as if recalling something from the past. He asked someone to prepare white silk wine for Huijun. After hearing this, Huijun's face turned pale. She smiled sadly. "I am willing to wait for you on the bridge of helplessness. I'm sorry, I still let you down. You are the empress. You cannot be humiliated by the rebel army. Do you understand?" "I understand." There were faint tears in Huijun's eyes as she leaned affectionately in the emperor's arms. "Your Majesty, before I die, I have no other wish. I only hope that your Majesty can hear the story of my past. If I can live completely in your heart, I can die without regrets." The emperor was anxious, but under Huijun's reassurance he became more patient. "Speak." Huijun stroked the side of his face affectionately with her left hand, and the dagger in her right sleeve slipped into her palm. Puff. Chapter 729. You vile, vile woman. The emperor had just been regretting losing Huijun. But in the next second, this woman thrust a dagger into his heart. He used all his strength to try and break free. His eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets, and he soon stopped breathing. Huijun sneered. Her blood-stained face broke into a carefree smile that had never been seen before. Her voice trembled as she went mad. "Dog Emperor, do you know how much I hate you?" As she spoke, she thrust the dagger in her right hand into his heart. She twisted the hilt and crushed his heart. Blood flowed from the wound and dyed her hand bright red. Her slender fingers were the color of red agate. "My hatred for you runs deep into my bones. You ruined my entire family and my life. Dog Emperor, you deserve this. You can die with everlasting regret. Open your eyes and watch. Your empire will follow you to hell." Don't forget who killed you in front of the king of hell. The emperor widened his eyes and breathed his last. Huijun pressed him to the ground and used all her strength to push the dagger into his heart. Then, she cut to the side and pulled open the wound. Your Majesty, open your eyes. Look, your blood is red, and so is your heart. I thought your heart had long been dyed black and filled with sludge. Huijun put her right hand into his chest through the wound and said with a silly smile, Your Majesty, open your eyes and take a look. Clang! The sound of something falling alarmed Huijun. She turned her head abruptly. Her beautiful eyes were no longer seductive. Instead, there was only ferocity left. She looked like a ferocious ghost that had crawled out of hell. The eunuch was looking at her in fear. There was a tray of clothes at his feet. It was prepared for the emperor to escape with his life. Huijun clicked her tongue and laughed. You saw it. The eunuch was so frightened that he fell on the floor of the carriage. He stammered for a long time before shouting uncontrollably. His Majesty is dead. His voice was loud and shrill. The surrounding guards heard it and felt a chill in their hearts. Their morale plummeted. The enemy took advantage of the situation to attack. His Majesty is dead. His Majesty is dead. His Majesty is dead. The little eunuch rolled and crawled out of the dragon carriage, crying and wailing. When he got off the carriage, he even fell down hard, causing him to see stars. Ignoring the pain, he staggered to his feet and continued to run for his life, as if there was a terrifying ghost chasing after him. When the officials heard the news, they almost fell to the ground. Their faces were filled with disbelief. The rebel army hadn't even reached the center. How could His Majesty die? How was this possible? How did His Majesty die? Because of this eunuch's report, the imperial guards were distracted, and their resistance was weak. Soon, they were torn apart by the rebel army and were utterly defeated. Amidst the chaos, the rebel general rushed all the way to the dragon carriage. He leaped onto the dragon carriage and lifted the curtain. His eyes almost popped out of his sockets. He saw a fat man in a dragon robe lying on the ground. Fresh blood flowed out of his chest, making him look like a piece of pork stained with blood. This should be the emperor. The general pondered and shifted his gaze to the peerless beauty beside the emperor. With just one glance, he felt that his heart had fallen into the other party's starry eyes, and he seemed to hear the sound of hundreds of flowers blooming in his ears. It was love at first sight. Admittedly, he had seen many peerless beauties, but in front of the woman in front of him, all the beauties in the world paled in comparison and became dull. I am the mother of the nation. General, you are being too presumptuous by looking at me so rudely. Huijun sat upright and secretly clenched the dagger in her sleeves. The blood on her skin had already been wiped clean by her. She had suffered too much humiliation in her life. She felt that it was dirty. Now that she was going to the underworld, she wanted to go clean and beautiful. The emptiness after getting her revenge made Huijun want to commit suicide. Living was too tiring. She was about to commit suicide when she didn't expect an unfamiliar rebel army general to barge in. This made Huijun's heart sink. However, thanks to the appearance of this rebel army general, Huijun regained her rationality and decisively gave up on the decision to quietly die. The previous Akeo had died long ago. The Huijun who lived was only for her Langjun, because this life was given to her by her Langjun. Unless her Langjun gave her permission, she had no right to dispose of this life, let alone commit suicide. No matter how difficult it was, she had to live. Mother of the nation? So you are the Empress. What a coincidence. The young general's eyes turned. His words were disdainful, but he secretly felt that it was a pity. Such a beautiful woman should have been treated carefully by the most magnificent man in the world. How did she end up with a man with a fat head and a pig's brain? Huijun looked at the man calmly. She smiled sweetly, and her eyes were full of charm. I am the mother of the nation. General, are you going to treat me like a normal concubine? The man thought that Huijun would panic and cry, or lose her composure and beg for mercy, just like the beautiful concubine who had been captured in the imperial city of Qinzhou. However, he didn't expect Huijun to have such a reaction. She didn't look like a prisoner at all. Not only did she not, but she was also arrogant. He was clearly looking down on her. But she was arrogant, as if she was looking down on all living things, including him. Even he couldn't help but want to kneel at her feet to show his submission. This thought only appeared for a moment before he forcefully suppressed it. He laughed arrogantly. You are the mother of the nation and my spoils of war. Naturally, you will be treated differently from normal concubines. Huijuan's heart relaxed. She had already sheathed the dagger in her sleeve. In a moment of panic, Huijun felt something tighten around her waist. Her whole body crashed into the man's chest and touched the cold and smelly armor. Beauty, I know you have a dagger in your hand. You can also use it to hurt me. Whether or not you can hurt me depends on your ability. As he said this, he smiled and bit Huijuan's earlobe. His warm and husky voice was full of seduction. Huijun was also experienced. How could she not know what this man was planning? She secretly gritted her teeth and resisted the urge to hurt him. Now self-preservation was the most important thing. She could bear with anything else. The man laughed and picked Huijun up and mounted the horse. The fighting outside continued. The rebel army's advantage was becoming more and more obvious. The rebel army and the Imperial Guards were fighting. Both sides were in a killing frenzy and didn't pay attention to the situation outside. The rebel army general felt very comfortable with such a beautiful woman. Just as he was about to pick up his weapon and continue killing, an inexplicable sense of danger shot from the soles of his feet to his brain. He couldn't describe the feeling. If he wanted to describe it specifically, it was as if there were eyes staring at him from all directions, making it impossible for him to escape. He raised his eyebrows and clamped down on the horse. Just as he was about to find the source of the danger, he saw chaos in a certain part of the battlefield. Huijun was leaning in the man's arms, accepting her fate. She calmly planned her next step. She knew that her face and body were the most irresistible attraction to men. If used well, she would be very safe. As she thought this, the man hugging her suddenly shouted and urged the horse to gallop in a certain direction. Huijun suddenly opened her eyes when she felt the jolt. Her bright eyes grew brighter and brighter, and her heart ached. Chapter 730. Langjun. The man's sharp ears caught Huijuan's murmur. The anger in his heart was ignited, and his eagle-like eyes were filled with undisguised murderous intent. The silver spear was unbelievably agile like a spirit snake. It drew streaks of dazzling silver light in the air. Bright red blood, silver spear, and dazzling red tassels. One man, one horse, and one spear tore a hole in the battlefield. The silver spear came at them head-on. Flesh was torn apart by the sharp blade, and blood splattered everywhere. Before the rebel soldiers who were entangled with the Imperial Guards could react, their throats and foreheads were dyed red. Their heavy bodies fell to the ground unconscious. It was like a wolf entering a flock of sheep. No matter how many sheep there were, they could not stop the momentum of the fierce wolf's slaughter. Huijun bit her lower lip nervously. Her hands involuntarily grabbed the man's armor. As the shadows of the spear flashed, the silver light was accompanied by blood. Even her emotions fluctuated violently. Is that your lover? The man hugging Huijun snorted coldly. He raised his weapon and charged toward the man. It's a pity that he's an overconfident brat. I'm afraid he won't be able to rest in peace. Jiang Pingji, dressed in red and silver armor, charged into the enemy's formation. It was as if there was no one there. Brat, eat my knife. Even with Huijun on his horse, the man was not affected. He slashed at Jiang Pingji's back with his heavy long knife. However, Jiang Pingji was not someone who could be ambushed so easily. She casually blocked the attack. The weapons collided with each other with a heavy sound that made one's teeth ache. You're quite strong. She sneered. She swept her spear horizontally, clearing away the enemies who came up to her. Then she charged toward the general. Little White did not disappoint its excellent bloodline. It was highly trained in war and understood human nature. It cooperated well with Jiang Pingji. It used its hooves to crush the chests and heads of several enemy soldiers. Its ferocious appearance did not reflect its usual shyness. Jiang Pingji chuckled. Huijun, I'm here to pick you up. To outsiders, the young general's handsome face was stained with blood, but it did not look ferocious. Instead, it gave people the impression that it was upright and clean. Langjun. Hui Jun replied with a trembling voice, her bloodshot eyes filled with tears. Just as she was about to lean forward, the hand that was restraining her waist suddenly tightened, pulling her back to reality. Hui Jun had never imagined that this person would actually appear at this time, and personally fulfill the promise he had made many years ago. You don't have to be afraid. When the dust settles, I will protect you. So she came here now. Her originally dead heart was now filled with fresh blood, allowing her to hear the thumping of her heartbeat. Such a beautiful atmosphere. There would always be people who didn't know what was good for them to spoil it. For example, the audience in the live broadcast room, for example the enemy general. Chinga Manwu. Sister Hui Jun, we're all here to pick you up. Let's go home. Little angel. Let's go home. Let's go home together. Almighty Ding Dang. You're so shameless. Carry my Miss Hui Jun, and do a 100-meter sprint. Don't even think about coveting her. Yinrian, ha! You stinky square-faced man. Let go of my big sister Hui Jun. Tianshui Xianla. I have a curse to say right now. Pervert. Where are your hands on Miss Hui Jun? The audience in the live broadcast room had all sorts of crusades against the enemy general. The man took advantage of her, and the strength he used to hold Hui Jun's waist was almost enough to strangle her. Seeing this, Jiang Pingji directly attacked the man's face without saying a word. It seemed that she had no intention of caring about Hui Jun in his arms. The man laughed loudly and advanced instead of retreating. You came at the right time. A young boy who hadn't even fully grown his pubic hair dared to snatch his woman? Clang! The sound of weapons colliding rang out. The ear-piercing high-pitched sound traveled into her eardrums. Hui Jun subconsciously shrank her head and closed her eyes. The man who was holding her was secretly shocked. He took a few steps back with his horse, and the horse under him even neighed in pain. How could Jiang Pingji give the other party time to react? Little White boldly rammed and bit the enemy's war horse. The silver spear in Jiang Pingji's hand turned into a shadow. She killed off the enemies that surrounded her, and she pressed forward step by step. The enemy did not dare to send out archers in consideration of their general's safety. Just as they hesitated for a moment, a cloud of dust rose from the distant horizon. Jiang Pingji rushed over on her horse. How late could her reinforcements be? The man who was holding Hui Jun gradually lost his strength. Sweat dripped down from under his helmet. After a round of fighting, one of his actions was greatly admired by Jiang Pingji and the audience in the streaming room. Both of them tacitly avoided Hui Jun. Jiang Pingji could forget about it. She had originally rushed over to save people. The man knew this, but he did not use Hui Jun as a shield. Instead, he did his best to protect her. This open and honest style won Jiang Pingji's favor. However, the audience was still determined to hate him. All men who fought with them for beautiful girls were heretics. The man was also surprised and depressed. His strength was already rare and tyrannical. After so many years, there were few who could match up to him. He did not expect to meet someone with even more brute force today. It turned out that he was a young general who had not fully matured. It was fine that he was born with divine strength, but he was also agile. The shadows of the spear were dense, like an impenetrable net. He, who had always been proud of his strength, did not dare to take it lightly. He could only barely resist. If it was not for the soldiers around him restraining the unfamiliar young general, the man felt that he would have lost even more miserably. He had to empty one hand to hold Hui Jun, and the other to hold the weapon. It was already sore and limp from frequent collisions. The muscles on his arm had swollen to the point of showing signs of blood. Hui Jun also noticed the situation. She hurriedly and frantically said, "I'm sorry." At that moment, the man's attention was completely focused on Jiang Pingji. He could not spare any extra attention. Hui Jun pulled out a dagger from her sleeve and slashed the man's thigh. While he was panicking from the pain, she leaned over and pounced on Jiang Pingji. "Oh my, you're not afraid of death." Jiang Pingji carefully noticed Hui Jun's movements. She had long prepared to borrow him, but she still lectured him. The man who had been tricked by Hui Jun came back to his senses. A trace of unwillingness flashed across his face. However, he did not attack Hui Jun. Instead, he spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva and laughed wantonly. "You dare to snatch a woman from me? You have guts. Tell me your name. If I'm in a good mood, maybe I'll leave you with a whole corpse. Jiang Pingji protected Huijun in her arms. If she was allowed to stay on the horse, who knew if she would become a target for arrows? Haha, aren't you afraid of cutting your tongue when you talk big? Jiang Pingji dealt with the enemy troops with ease. At that moment, she had already tried to break out of the encirclement and regroup with the army. The rebels had no more scruples. Several cold arrows were aimed at her vital parts. Jiang Pingji lowered her voice and said to Huijun, "Hold me tight. Be careful." Chapter 731. Jiang Pingji gave Little White an order. Little White was as excited as if it was on drugs. It charged into the crowd with its hooves. Jiang Pingji cooperated and shot down the arrows that were sneaking up on her and Little White. Little White not only ran fast, but it also changed its speed midway. When its hooves kicked, it took away a life with each hoof. When the human and the horse worked together, they were like the god of death. The imperial guards nearby were helping to restrain the rebel army. They could not focus on her. Under such conditions, Jiang Pingji was even more skilled and at ease. The number of souls that died under her spear kept increasing. She and Huijun, who was in her arms, were almost covered in blood, but they were surprisingly unharmed. "Bring me my bow and arrows." The young general spat. His right hand, which was holding the weapon, almost lost all feeling. Watching Jiang Pingji's back gradually disappear, he knocked an arrow and drew his bow. He aimed at Jiang Pingji's back. The two-stone-heavy bow was as light as a feather in his hands. The arrow left the bowstring and broke through the air. It was a dazzling arrow. At that moment, besides his arrow, there were dozens of other arrows. Jiang Pingji frowned secretly. She shot down the other arrows and hugged Huijun to avoid being hit in the vital areas. In the end, the arrow that should have pierced through her back brushed past her arm. Huijun witnessed the scene with her own eyes. She saw that Jiang Pingji's arm had an arrow wound. Her eyes widened and she clenched her fists. She developed a strong hatred for the general just now. She trembled and said, "Langjun, you're injured." Jiang Pingji said nonchalantly, "It's just a small wound. It'll heal in a day or two." It was not that she could not avoid the arrow, but Little White could not keep up with such extreme speed. She still had to worry about Huijun. In the end, she was injured, but it was only a small wound the length of a finger. If the arrowhead had been smeared with poison, it would have caused her some trouble. Unfortunately, the arrow was not poisonous, so she did not need to care. Little White quickly left the enemy's shooting range and quickly entered the area of their support. "My lord," Li Yin and the others' horses were not as fast as Little White. Most of the troops still relied on their two legs to run. How could they catch up? On one hand, they were on tenterhooks, and on the other, they used all their strength to rush back. Their lord actually came back unscathed? With such a willful and reckless master, the life of the subordinates would be shortened by several years. "My heart is so tired, I really want to quit." "I'm fine." Jiang Pingji shook the blood off her spear and said calmly, "His Majesty's carriage and ministers are in front." When Meng Hun and the others heard this, they knew that the target was right in front of them. They led the army and charged forward like wolves and tigers. The Imperial Guards thought that they would definitely be defeated. How could they have known that reinforcements would come to their rescue? As if he had been injected with chicken blood, his spirit was roused, and his depressed aura climbed back to its peak. Everyone's morale was boosted, and they launched a counterattack against the enemy. The balance of the battle tilted in their favor again. When the enemy general saw this, his face darkened. Just as he was about to raise his weapon to fight, a cold-faced young man came charging at him. Li Yin could tell how dangerous this man was, and immediately picked him as his opponent to prevent him from killing ordinary soldiers. Another spear user. The general had just suffered a loss at the hands of Jiang Pingji, and immediately a strange young general jumped out. This made him furious. Hearing the man's words, Li Yin retorted indignantly, "What's wrong with a spear? Did he eat your rice?" He had learned these words from his master, and they were the best at infuriating. In a battlefield, it was a taboo to be distracted and angry. Verbal provocation was also a tactic. The man was so angry that he laughed. He planned to teach Li Yun a lesson. There was nothing wrong with being young and frivolous, but he had to know his place. In terms of battlefield experience, the man was naturally a level higher. However, he had already been tortured by Jiang Pingji, and his condition was not even 30% of his peak. How could he fight against Li Yun, who was known for his speed? Li Yun's horse was not bad, but his horse was far from his opponent's ferocious horse. The situation was in a stalemate. However, the outcome of the battle was not something the two of them could control. The Imperial Guards and reinforcements directly beat Prince Changshuo's army to the point of tears. The man glared angrily at the direction Li Yun and Jiang Pingji retreated to. With a feint, he deceived Li Yun and turned to leave. "Don't go." Li Yun was ashamed and angry. He had been tricked. When he regained his senses and was about to give chase, he was stopped by Meng Hun, who had rushed over. "Hanmei, don't chase a cornered enemy." Li Yun held back his anger. "Why not?" Meng Hun could only hurriedly say. "I know that person. You can't handle his sneak attack yet." If Li Yun dared to chase after him, he would definitely not have it easy. He might even be killed by the opponent. Li Yun did not believe it, but when he took a closer look at the man's retreating posture and his tense right arm, he was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. "You're letting them escape just like that?" Li Yun was exasperated. The military merit that was already in his mouth flew away just like that? Without a generous military merit, he naturally could not receive a generous reward. Without a reward, he could not fill his wallet. What would he use to marry a wife? Thinking of Shang Guanwan's background, how could Li Yun's heart be described as gloomy? A stray dog will always have a chance. Meng Hun sighed. His eyes flashed with some emotion. "Let's go. Clean up the battlefield and report to the Lord." On the other side, Jiang Pingji also encountered a difficult problem. This problem was given to her by Huijun. Langjun, your servant killed the emperor just now." Huijun hesitated and struggled, but she still told the truth. At that time, if Huijun did not make the first move to gain the upper hand, the emperor would personally feed her poison wine or strangle her with white silk. She understood the emperor too well. He would rather be destroyed than let Huijun live. Why? Because he did not want Huijun to be tainted by other men. Rather than live, he would rather kill her with his own hands. Even in death, Huijun would protect his chastity. "You killed him?" Jiang Pingji frowned. She did not expect that the emperor did not die at the hands of Prince Changshuo, but was sent to hell by Huijun's dagger. Huijun was about to ask for forgiveness. "Langjun, your servant." If her death could help Jiang Pingji avoid trouble, she would gladly do it. But Jiang Pingji said, "Forget it. If he's dead, then he's dead. He's a piece of trash that will die sooner or later. The earlier he dies, the sooner he can reincarnate. It's not like he's the only emperor who can be emperor. If one dies, there are still millions of people waiting in line. What's there to be anxious about?" To her, the emperor's death was far better than his life. Because if the emperor died, there would be more room for maneuvering. For example, the alliance could elect a young puppet emperor. Such an emperor would be easy to coax, trick, and manipulate. Similarly, this would also help her restore her identity. As for rescuing the emperor, her purpose in coming to rescue the emperor was to do business, poach people, and get the title of Wanzhou magistrate. That did not include keeping the emperor alive. Huijun killing the emperor had actually helped her greatly. However, as the person who had personally killed the emperor, her existence had to be well hidden. She could plan other things after the limelight had passed. Chapter 732. Jiang Pingji thought about it, and decided to hide Huijun first, so that she could fake her death to avoid detection. Looking at her face, Jiang Pingji raised her hand and wiped the wound on her arm, smearing Huijun's clean face with blood. "I'll have to trouble you for the next few days. Once things settle down, I'll make sure that you don't have to worry for the rest of your life." Huijun felt the touch on her cheek. After a moment of silence, she said in a low voice, "To me, Langjun is more important than a second parent. As long as Langjun says the word, even if I have to give up my life, I will have no complaints. I am willing to serve you for the rest of my life." Jiang Pingji raised her hand and pointed between Huijuan's eyebrows with her index finger. Huijun looked up in astonishment, only to see Jiang Pingji smiling and refusing. No, there will be people who will treat you gently in the future. There is hope as long as you are alive, so why be so pessimistic? There's still a long way to go. Huijun clenched her fists in her sleeves and lowered her head. Yes, Jiang Pingji sent someone to strip a set of clothes off the corpse of the Imperial Guard and let Huijun change into it. No matter what, he had to get past this hurdle first. Once the limelight was over, he could change Huijuan's identity. After finishing this task, he also ordered his personal guard to handle another matter. She asked the guards to search the battlefield to see if there were any female ministers who had been killed by accident. She chose a corpse that was closer to Huijuan's and completely destroyed the face of the corpse. She changed it into Huijuan's clothes and disguised it as Huijuan's corpse. As for whether anyone would suspect it, now only those with big fists have the right to speak. Those ministers who only have a defeated army dare to make a fuss? My lord, His Majesty is already in heaven. Yanlin glanced coldly at the messy battlefield and whispered to Yang Jian. Yang Jian's face was still filled with excitement. When he heard these words, he froze on the spot. Bin Tian. Yang Jian choked on his words and couldn't come back to his senses. His Majesty is in heaven. Xiaoyang, what should we do now? Yanlin's tone was cold and decisive. Let's stabilize the situation first. Don't panic. We just need to cooperate with the alliance and the courtiers to elect a new emperor. If the emperor died, then so be it. In any case, the royal family had many backups. As long as the person who ascended the throne was Prince Changsho, everything would be fine. There were not many people or things that Yanlin cared about. The so-called emperor was not one of them. In Yanlin's eyes, the merit of supporting the new emperor was no less than saving the emperor's life. The former was easier. Yang Jian's heart felt stifled, but the emperor's corpse was already cold. No matter what he did, he could not change the truth. Both armies were well trained. Although they had never cooperated with each other before, they did not hold each other back. After working together to repel the enemy, no one pursued them. Instead, the first thing they did was to comfort the frightened ministers and their families. Feng Zhen, Yang Si, and Yanlin were in charge of dealing with the courtiers. The work of using their brains was naturally left to these scholars. Xiaoyang, I sneaked a peek at His Majesty's body. He died a terrible death. It doesn't look like he was killed by the enemy. Yang Tao had taken advantage of the chaos to sneak a peek at the corpse. There was an exquisite and luxurious knife in the emperor's chest, and his heart had been squeezed out. Yanlin looked calm. It doesn't look like they were killed by the enemy. Yang Tao nodded vigorously. It doesn't look like he was killed by the enemy. It looks more like he was assassinated during the chaos. Pieces of his heart are out. Jiang Pingji had arrived too quickly, and the situation was chaotic. No one knew what had happened in the chaos. There was only one enemy general who knew that Jiang Pingji had taken Huijun away. When Jiang Pingji rushed back with Huijun in her arms, Huijun was buried in her arms. Everyone thought she was a captive. According to the eunuchs who had served the emperor was not killed by the enemy, but by the Empress. Yang Tao murmured with fear still lingering in his heart. The Empress killed the emperor? If you are not a family, you will not marry into the same family. This Empress is cruel. Don't pry too much into the royal family's private affairs. Don't dirty your eyes. Yanlin's expression was calm and emotionless. Yang Tao replied obediently, Okay, I understand. The more I say, the more wrong I will be. I will speak less in the future. Jiang Pingji hastily treated her wound and wrapped her arm with a clean cloth. The battlefield had been partially cleaned up, but the corpses were still everywhere. Blood stained the ground, and the air was filled with the nauseating smell of blood. With her sharp eyes, she saw a few middle-aged men dressed as officials surrounding Yang Si and the others. They looked agitated and indignant. The demon empress must be killed. Regicide is a crime punishable by death. How can we let her go so easily? If we don't kill the demon empress, we won't be able to pacify the people. I hope you can send troops to capture her as soon as possible to comfort His Majesty's soul in heaven. Jiang Pingji walked forward, and the officials looked displeased. They were in the middle of a serious discussion, and this insensible young general dared to interrupt them? She was about to say that the commoners were not allowed to come near, but Yang Si and Feng Jin bowed to her. "My lord, who are we going to kill? We can hear it from afar." Jiang Pingji was satisfied to see the officials' expressions, as if they had eaten a fly. His Majesty is in heaven, and the officials have said that the Empress is the murderer. But in this chaos, it's really difficult to find the murderer. Yang Si and Feng Jin were tired of the officials. They had no ability, but they were good at commanding people. It was fine to give orders, but they were giving orders blindly. They and Yang Jian's troops had a total of 25,000 soldiers, and they had just suffered some losses. It was already difficult enough to protect the officials and their families with such a small number of soldiers. Later, they would have to escort the emperor's body back to the imperial city of Qinzhou and drive away the enemy troops in the city. They were severely understaffed. These officials, who took advantage of their seniority, wanted to overstep their authority and asked them to send troops to find the empress who had killed the emperor. Wasn't this telling Prince Changshu? Come, we are understaffed. Hurry up and send someone to attack us? Thinking of this, Yang Si and the others didn't know what to say. However, these were all old officials in the court. They were old and respected, so they couldn't be treated lightly. They could only respond to them. Jiang Pingji's eyes moved, and she calmly glanced at the officials. Her eyes were calm, but the blood on her body and the murderous aura that hadn't dissipated made them nervous and subconsciously feel weak. Jiang Pingji stared at them and said, "Their words are not unreasonable. His Majesty's death is a matter of national mourning. We can't let the murderer go so easily. As for the Empress, there seems to be a body that fits the criteria, but the body was almost trampled by people and horses, and it was beyond recognition. Only the clothes on the body can identify it. Why don't you go and identify it?" The officials looked at each other. They were all experienced people, so how could they not see that Yang Si and the others were just being perfunctory? They were all prepared for a long war, but they didn't expect Yang Si and the others to be so easy to talk to. "Thank you." The few old officials bowed and expressed their gratitude with great sincerity. Chapter 733. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 armored soldiers carried a simple stretcher over, one in front and one behind. Several ministers secretly craned their necks to see what was going on. The person on the stretcher was covered with a layer of white cloth, but there was blood dripping from the bottom. Pieces of flesh fell from time to time. This situation caused the eyes of the old ministers to twitch, and a bit of fear arose in their hearts. Before they could say anything, Jiang Pingji asked someone to remove the white cloth, revealing the corpse inside. The head was colorful. Blood and brain matter mixed with skull fragments. The body below the neck was no longer what it was. Only the color and material of the clothes on the body could be seen. One look, and you could tell that it was not something an ordinary person could wear. The ministers' faces turned green, and some could not help but turn their heads and retch. They weren't the only ones who vomited because of the hardcore scene. Even Jiang Pingji's advisor was so shocked that his face turned pale. The bullet screens in the streaming room were overwhelming. The audience tried to use the bullet screens to cover up the horrible scene. The disgust index was off the charts. Pingji's wife. "Oh my God, I'm scared to death. The scene in the streaming room is scarier than a supernatural thriller." Shinjia. "Host, can we discuss something? Can you give us a warning before the high-energy scene?" Bloodstained Rose Thorn. "I force myself to watch the scene of the streamer slaughtering her way in and out. In the end, I kneel before a corpse. To be honest, I'm so scared that my hair is about to stand up. I heard that Guojia is censoring the violence. Wouldn't the streaming room be forced to censor such a violent scene that could give people a heart attack? To be honest, the Ring of Death is not that scary." Guikai Guofengxiu. "The host's streaming room has been running for so many years. It would have been censored a long time ago." And Changhuan. "As an emergency nurse, I've seen many car accident scenes. I thought I had a high tolerance level, and that there was nothing in the world that could scare me to tears, until I entered this live stream. I hugged my chubby self with a heartache. The audience in the streaming room had a big reaction, but Jiang Pingji was still indifferent. She had seen all kinds of scenes. This bloody scene was a piece of cake for her. She asked the old ministers calmly, "Look carefully. Is this the devil Empress corpse?" A few of the old officials were as pale as snow. Some of them had to be supported to stand. They deeply suspected that Jiang Pingji was doing this on purpose. Even the corpse's mother wouldn't be able to recognize it, let alone them. They didn't have any special abilities. So how could they identify the owner of a corpse that had been trampled into mud? However, the Empress was indeed wearing this set of clothes. Looking at the person's height, it seemed to fit. An old official could not bear it any longer. He covered his face with his sleeves, unable to bear to see the tragic state of the corpse. Jiang Pingji secretly curled her lips into a faint smile. "You guys are so blind. Can't you see that this corpse has dirted the eyes of the noble? What are you still standing there for? Take the corpse away and bury it properly. We'll deal with it later." In my opinion, the most important thing right now is to take back the imperial city of Chenzhou as soon as possible and save those who haven't retreated yet. As for this corpse, it won't grow wings and fly away. The old ministers agreed. That makes sense. In any case, the demon empress was already a corpse and couldn't be any more dead. There was still time to settle the score in the future. The enemy's attack was too sudden. The people in the city barely had time to react. The emperor could only take the ministers and their families with him. The other officials had no time to evacuate and were all abandoned in the city. The longer they were delayed, the more danger they would be in. Just as Jiang Pingji said, they should turn around and fight their way back to the imperial city as soon as possible to minimize their losses. The emperor couldn't be the only commander in the imperial court. He had to rely on a large number of ordinary officials to support him. More importantly, the ministers exchanged glances with one another, their expressions so solemn that water could drip out of them. The emperor had passed away so suddenly that he didn't have time to leave behind any edicts for his successor. As the old ministers that the emperor had relied on, they had to choose a successor as soon as possible to stabilize the court. They couldn't let the traitors get away with it. The emperor had 4 sons. The eldest prince had been killed, and the second prince had cursed the emperor and the empress with witchcraft. After the truth was revealed, his mother's family was implicated, and the emperor ordered her to be exterminated. The second prince had also been imprisoned and died of an illness. Now only the third and fourth princes were still alive. The fourth prince's legs had been crushed by a carriage. He was already a cripple who couldn't stand up. How could he ascend the throne? After careful consideration, only the third prince, who had been demoted to a commoner, was the most suitable candidate. But now that the war was in chaos, if they didn't go back to rescue him, the third prince might have already been killed. If that was the case, who would inherit the throne? It was easy to imagine that there would be a bloody battle. The ministers had a beautiful idea, but they didn't know that Jiang Pingji wasn't just there to rescue the emperor. "How's the situation?" Jiang Pingji whispered to Feng Zhen. "Have you found out everything?" Feng Zhen narrowed his eyes. He had found a chance to ask the eunuch and the palace maids about the situation. He had heard a lot of interesting things. He said, "My lord, I have found out everything. Of the 4 princes, only the third and fourth princes are still alive. But the fourth prince, Wu Majun, is a cripple with crippled legs. He won't have a chance to stand up in this lifetime. Therefore, the most suitable candidate is the third prince. The third prince's background isn't simple. His mother was from a branch of the Feng family. If he ascends to the throne, I'm afraid it will be troublesome." Jiang Pingji sneered. To put it nicely, they are a branch of the Feng family. To put it bluntly, they are unrelated blood relatives. So what if the third prince ascends to the throne? Will the Feng family use all their power to help him? Haha, naive. It's more realistic to dream. She wasn't the only one who saw it clearly. The Feng family saw it even more clearly. Dongqing was rotten to the bone. There was no way to save it. Even if the third prince ascended to the throne, would the feudal lords, who had a lot of troops, surrender obediently? Just one question. Why? Why would the feudal lords hand over their lives? Because they had been living off Dongqing's salary for a few years? How shameless! Jiang Pingji continued. The Feng family is full of shrewd people. They won't take the risk. Dongqing is rotten to the bone. There is no way to save it. If they are dragged into the court's dispute because of the third prince, I'm afraid the Feng family, which has been passed down for thousands of years, will come to an end. Therefore, you don't have to worry about the Feng family. But Zisher is right. If the third prince ascends to the throne, it will indeed bring some trouble. If an adult emperor sat on the throne, it would indeed be more difficult for Jiang Pingji to be the official magistrate of Wanzhou. So the third prince, I'm sorry. Chapter 734. Cut the weeds by the roots. Jiang Pingji tilted her head and looked at him. She squinted her eyes lazily and opened her mouth. Do you even need to ask? If you don't cut the weeds by the roots, they will grow again in spring. I won't do something like nurturing a tiger and inviting calamity. Do it cleanly and cleanly. Feng Zhen was about to leave when Jiang Pingji suddenly remembered something and called out to him. Right, kill the fourth prince as well. Feng Zhen was surprised. The fourth prince was already a cripple with both legs. It was impossible for him to ascend to the throne. Despite his doubts, Feng Zhen didn't question her. The subordinates could only follow the orders given by their lord and run the errands. One death was death. Two deaths were also death. The third prince and the fourth prince died together, which could be considered as fulfilling their brotherhood in this lifetime. Jiang Pingji saw Feng Zhen walk away and sneered. Why did she include the crippled fourth prince? He was the son of the fake Wang Huiyan. She had the help of the system and wouldn't die easily. Who knew if she would come up with some evil plan to cure the fourth prince's legs? When Jiang Pingji killed the third prince, Wu Majun would be the only one left, and the throne would rightfully fall to him. She didn't want to cause trouble for herself. She had to be cautious. She couldn't do something like making a wedding dress for someone else. Haha. If Wu Majun's legs were really healed and she killed the fourth prince, would that time traveler woman vomit blood? She didn't know if she would, but she would definitely be depressed. Ijimiji. Oh, my streamer is so cool as a villain. She directly murdered a prince, awesome. Zhuge. That's amazing. I feel like my worldview has been led into the gutter by the streamer. I actually thought she was super cool when she was secretly discussing the plot with Feng Zhen. This is probably the charm of a villain. It feels so good to beat up a little kid. I live next door. I surnamed Wang. How does the streamer look like a villain? Villains don't have a good ending. Our streamer is the main female lead. Lao Wang is not as good as Lao Songchang. How is she the main female lead? She's obviously the main male lead. She's so handsome that I can't close my legs. Zhen has a sword. What? Pengji, your majesty? All the other women have been taken away. When are you coming to marry Bao Bao? Xingyue, say no more. Draw your sword, love rival. Prince Changshuo's army was stopped midway and suffered heavy losses. They had no choice but to retreat to the imperial city of Qinzhou. They burned, killed, and looted, almost releasing the most evil part of human nature. Smoke and fire filled the air, and the sound of crying filled the air. The once rich and luxurious capital was now filled with smoke and fire. It was a complete mess. Due to the military order, the enemy did not dare to make a move on the people of the rich and powerful families. At most, they would rob them of their money and maids. They did not dare to touch the proper madams and noble ladies. And the ministers and high-ranking officials also avoided them as much as possible. They were worried about these officials, because Prince Changshuo still needed them to fill the ranks of the new imperial court. However, the soldiers would not care about the common people and the concubines and beauties abandoned by the emperor. The entire imperial city was in chaos. General, they had fought back. Should we go out of the city to face the enemy? The enemy general lowered his eyes and said decisively, No, there are only 6,000 brothers left. Continuing to fight is futile. The deputy who reported the news had a sorrowful look on his face. General, are we just going to endure it? The general sneered. Endure? Revenge is a dish best served cold. There will always be an opportunity. Retreating is just to find a better opportunity. A lack of forbearance in small matters would spoil great plans. When it was time to endure, one could not act impulsively. When it was time to give up, one could not be overcautious. The current situation was not in their favor. If they continued to fight, they would be completely annihilated. The best thing to do now was to meet up with the main army as soon as possible. The general decisively gave the order to abandon the city and escape. Before abandoning the city, he ordered his men to take away all the officials who had not escaped in time. Without these mainstay officials, the imperial court would be nothing more than an empty shell. How long would it be able to survive? Little did he know, his action had actually helped Jiang Pingji greatly. 2 hours after they left, Jiang Pingji and Yang Jian's army arrived. The city was in ruins. The once luxurious palace was now in ruins. It was like hell on earth. On both sides of the road, there were many dead palace maids with disheveled clothes. Many eunuchs had died tragically, their heads separated from their bodies. My lord, there are probably no more enemies in the city. We can send someone to do that first. It'll be easier to do it later. Feng Zhen had not yet entered the city. He looked at Jiang Pingji and said in a low voice, "We can't afford to lose this opportunity. If they did not kill the princes while everyone was distracted, it would be troublesome later." "Okay, I understand. Keep Yanlin busy. Don't let him know." Feng Zhen chuckled. Yanlin is not a simple man. Even if he knows, he will probably pretend not to know. As long as Yang Jian and Jiang Pingji's interests did not conflict, Yanlin had no reason to stop them. Feng Zhen and Yanlin commanded and stabilized the situation in the city. They put out the fires, rescued the people, and cleaned up the rebels. Yang Si was in charge of dealing with the old officials. He led his men to catch up with the main army, and by time, their lord was an extremely daring person, and the counselor who followed her to fool around was naturally not as timid as a mouse. It was just killing 2 princes. So be it. Yang Si rode on the horse with a smile on his face. He did not have the slightest sense of urgency from the war. In the imperial city of Qinzhou, the 3rd prince was convicted of seducing his stepmother and causing chaos in the palace. He was expelled from the royal family by the emperor. However, his mother was from a side branch of the Feng family. Even though she was now a commoner, his life was not affected. When the imperial city was breached, he was still playing with the birds in the garden. It was not until the housekeeper came to report that he realized the situation outside had changed. He wanted to escape, but the city gate was occupied by the enemy. He could only change into commoner clothes and hide in the haystack of the stable. He barely managed to escape the calamity, but all the concubines, maids, and manservants in his mansion were all killed. It was not that he did not hate them, but he was afraid of death. Even if his beloved concubine was being bullied not far away, he could not muster up the courage to fight to the death. It was not until the enemy had retreated, and his mansion was in shambles, that he carefully crawled out. The situation in the imperial city of Qinzhou changed quickly. In the blink of an eye, news came in. The alliance had sent reinforcements. The evil empress was dead. The rebels had been defeated. The emperor had passed away. The 3rd prince's heart beat like a drum when he heard the last piece of news. His 2 older brothers were dead. His 4th brother, Wuma Jun, had no chance. He was the only one left. As for the matter of him and his stepmother causing chaos in the palace, he only needed to push the blame to the evil empress, and he would be able to clear his name. The 3rd prince's limbs were filled with strength when he thought about this. Only when a group of armored elites entered the 3rd prince's residence did he feel completely at ease. "I am the 3rd prince you are looking for." The soldier looked him up and down and asked in a low voice, "Are you really?" The 3rd prince was infuriated and scolded the man. Although the 3rd prince was not very capable, he had been raised in the royal family for many years. Ordinary people could not imitate his nobility. Chapter 735. When the 3rd prince heard this, he felt that something was wrong, but he didn't take it to heart. But before he could take 2 steps, the leader of the soldiers suddenly stepped forward and blocked his way. The next moment he felt a sharp pain in his chest. "I'll send you to hell. Please don't blame me, Your Highness." Amidst the pain, he vaguely heard the man's scornful and mocking voice. The third prince used all his strength to spit out 2 words. "You." He didn't finish his sentence before he breathed his last. His body slumped to one side. The soldier kicked the third prince. Seeing that he couldn't be more dead, he immediately threw the third prince's body into the well in the backyard. Once the body was in the water, it would be difficult to determine the time of death. When the time came, they just had to blame Prince Changsho's army for the third prince's death. "Let's go. There's no trace of the third prince here, only a lunatic. Let's search somewhere else." 2 flowers bloomed, one on each side. The third prince breathed his last, but the fourth prince couldn't be found. Not only could they not find him, but they couldn't even enter the fourth prince's manor. The soldier secretly reported this matter to Feng Zhen. Feng Zhen was surprised. "You can't find the fourth prince's manor?" The soldier felt wronged. It wasn't that they couldn't find the fourth prince's manor, but they could see it, but they couldn't enter. It was clearly that residence, but it was as if he had encountered a ghost and was unable to approach it. Feng Zhen didn't believe in supernatural powers, but this made him wary. "You can leave now. Keep a close eye on that place. Don't let anyone get close." Feng Zhen sent the soldier away in a low voice. After frowning, he found Jiang Pingji and briefly explained the problem at hand. "My lord, supernatural powers can't be trusted. But if the fourth prince is fine, he can use this miracle to build support for himself. The people and the court officials will definitely side with him. If that's the case, why don't we be ruthless and burn down all the mansions nearby? That will completely eliminate any future problems." Feng Zhen firmly believed that supernatural powers were fake, but there were too many ignorant people who were too easy to fool. Looking at the history of emperors, which of them didn't create 1 or 2 mythical stories for themselves? Otherwise, how could the words "the monarch's authority is bestowed by God" be true? After Jiang Pingji heard this, she smiled and asked Feng Zhen in return, "Burn all the nearby mansions? That was a good idea. But what if fire didn't work? All of the nearby mansions have been burnt to ashes, and only the fourth prince's mansion is still intact. In this way, not only have we not achieved our goal, but we have also helped them build up their momentum. This wasn't some kind of supernatural power. It was just someone playing tricks in the dark. It's just a trick, a mere swindler." Feng Zhen was astonished, but before he could voice his doubts, Jiang Pingji threw the matter in her hands to him. "Help me deal with this for a while. As for the fourth prince, I will personally send him to hell." If the soldiers could easily find the fourth prince, it meant that the time traveler did not think of using Wu Majun. That was for the best. It would save her trouble. But now, the soldiers could clearly see the fourth prince's mansion, but they couldn't get close to it no matter what. This was thought-provoking. In ancient times, people would blame this on supernatural powers, but the viewers in the live stream room had a different way of thinking. Coca-Cola. When I heard the host say that she would send the fourth prince to hell, I feel like she's about to explode. She's so evil that I want to marry her. Pepsi-Cola. You're all smitten with the hosts too. 8-meter aura. Am I the only one who noticed Feng Zhen's words? I'm super curious. What happened to the fourth prince's mansion? Why did it look like ghosts were going around in circles? Could it be that there really are demons and ghosts in this world? Chiyue Bohi. Even if there are demons and ghosts, our host can still tear them apart. What are you afraid of? Cling to the host's thighs. Lemon lemon. Thinking about what the host said before, I feel that the fourth prince's legs might not be crippled. Moreover, the eldest prince, the second prince, and the third prince are all kneeling. Won't the title of emperor fall on his head? Even if his legs are crippled, ancient people were very superstitious. If the fourth prince is covered in a layer of myths and is blessed by the heavens, perhaps an exception will be made? Everything is hard to say. Ancient people always liked to add myths and spirits to inexplicable phenomena. But in the eyes of modern people, it was mostly a show. If the fourth prince seized the opportunity, he might be able to make a comeback. Unfortunately, his opponent was none other than Jiang Pingji. She was a person who specialized in dealing with all kinds of demons, vulgarities, and scum. The fourth prince was not favored. After he came to Qinzhou, the fourth prince's wife, Lu Huan, gave birth to an ominous two-headed conjoined demon infant, which caused Wu Majun to be demoted again and again. Because of various reasons, his mansion was located in the most remote part of the imperial city. The surroundings looked desolate and clean. The houses nearby looked more like haunted mansions. It was obvious how much the emperor hated Wu Majun when he was alive. Jiang Pingji didn't alert anyone. She avoided all the spies and quietly moved closer, looking at the mansion in front of her. Not only was she shocked, but the audience was also surprised. Lulu Wading, no way? This is the fourth prince's mansion? It doesn't look like it at all. Even a normal rich businessman is better off than this, right? Shinjia. After all, he's not favored, and he doesn't have a family to rely on. He must have a hard time. It's normal for him to be poor. The audience in the streaming room was discussing the appearance of the fourth prince's mansion, but Jiang Pingji didn't care. She just frowned. The whole mansion was covered by a strange spiritual aura. It could affect the judgment of ordinary people. Bookworm Xiaoyin. Host, let's go and take a look. Let's see if it's really a ghost wall. Wanzhao Qingkong. We have to believe in science. We have to oppose all superstitions. Ghosts are just a trick to deceive people. Jiang Pingji observed for a while and suddenly laughed. It was indeed a trick that couldn't be used in public. It could work on ordinary people with weak mental strength, but to confuse her? It would be faster to refine it. Compared to the cold outside, the inside of the mansion was very lively. Wu Majun hugged a few mates all day long and had fun. He was very carefree. Humph, you're still messing around here? He reached his hand into the maid's collar. His palm was soft. Seeing that a disharmonious scene was about to unfold, a cold snort suddenly sounded. It was as if he had been struck by lightning. He pushed the bewildered servant girl to the side and chased everyone out. He knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "Mother." A delicate and pretty figure suddenly appeared in the originally empty place. She was dressed in red. Her beauty was unparalleled. Her face was covered with gorgeous makeup, which made her look even more flirtatious. Chapter 736. You still know that I'm your mother? The woman in red snorted coldly. Wu Majun confessed in fear and trepidation. After a while he was moved to tears. Mother, what you said makes me feel terrified. The woman in red did not want to waste time with him. The Allied army has already entered the city. It's time for you to perform. Don't let me down. Facing such a merciless order, Wu Majun was secretly resentful. However, he appeared docile and obedient with a strong sense of childlike admiration. I understand. I will definitely not disappoint Imperial Mother's expectations. A few days ago, this woman had suddenly appeared in front of him and claimed to be Wu Majun's deceased mother, Imperial concubine Wang. Of course, Wu Majun did not believe her. Although he had never seen Imperial concubine Wang, he knew that the dead could not come back to life. She did not talk nonsense with him. Instead, she gave him elixirs that cured his crippled legs in an instant. Faced with this fact, and recalling the way she had appeared out of nowhere, Wu Majun's heart beat wildly. This was clearly a trick that only a deity could do. Regardless of whether she was his mother or not, based on the ability she had displayed, she was his biological mother. Relying on the magical powers of his biological mother, the enemy troops who had invaded the imperial city treated this house as if it was nothing. Wu Majun's life had been very comfortable. Your father is dead, and so are your eldest and second brothers. Now the only one who can compete with you is your third brother. The woman in red opened her red lips slightly. Her eyes were cold. She stood in front of Wu Majun and looked down at him. She said arrogantly, "With me helping you, the outside world will think that you are the beloved son of God. I even cured your crippled legs. This is your confidence to compete for the throne. No one can be compared to you. When the time comes, I will contact the Wang family and ask them to support you. Then, you can sit on the throne." Of course, the woman in red could not contact the Wang family again, but her words reassured Wu Majun. When the emperor died, the most qualified person to inherit the throne was the emperor's son. Wuma Jun's heart was beating like thunder. He was so nervous that even his palms were sweating. He had never thought that the throne that he had dreamed of for so long would be so close to him. It was almost within his reach. All of this was thanks to the red-clothed woman before him, his birth mother. He said to the red-clothed woman, "Thank you, Imperial Mother, for your meticulous planning for me. Once I sit on the dragon throne, I will definitely make you the Empress Dowager." In the past, the woman in red would have been quite interested in the Empress Dowager. But now she lacked interest. So what if she was the Empress Dowager? No matter how noble a woman was, she was still a widow. She could not do as she pleased like the emperor. I am satisfied that my son has such filial piety. The sword of Damocles, Lu Shi, was hanging above her head. If she was not careful, it would fall and take her life. The most important thing now was to break this sword. The woman in red clenched her teeth in hatred when she recalled how she had failed to assassinate him while disguised as a dancer. Because of that operation, she owed the system 1 billion popularity points. In order to pay off her debt as soon as possible, she had been crazily doing quests during this period of time. She had even agreed to many excessively explicit requests from the audience. Her self-esteem had been repeatedly trampled on by the audience. Her hatred for Emperor Chen grew, and her hatred for the audience in the live broadcast grew. What was even more infuriating was that she could not throw a tantrum at the audience. If she offended these rich people, who would be willing to spend a lot of money for her? Later, she had a careful discussion with the system. To take Lu Shi's life, assassination alone was not enough. If her son, Wuma Jun, ascended to the throne, he would be able to use his status as the emperor to suppress Lu Shi. She would then take the opportunity to use the level 9 loyalty talisman on Lu Shi. If not for this, she would not have thought of Wuma Jun, her useless son. In order to cure Wuma Jun's crippled legs, she had no choice but to buy elixirs in installments from the system. At first, she was a little reluctant. The elixirs required too many popularity points. She did not want to bear the debt for Wuma Jun. However, the possibility of a prince with crippled legs competing for the throne was too small. He could easily be feared by the new emperor. Under the persuasion of the system, the woman in red gritted her teeth and bought one. Apart from that, she also spent some popularity points to promote Wuma Jun. She placed invisibility talismans around the mansion to ensure that ordinary people could not enter. This would not only protect Wuma Jun, but it would also create an illusion for others that Wuma Jun was blessed by God, and that he was God's favorite son. Who else in the world was more qualified than him to be the emperor? Ancient people were superstitious and stupid. As long as there was enough publicity, Wuma Jun would be gilded with a layer of gold. Now that the alliance had conquered the imperial city of Chenzhou and defeated Prince Changshu's rebel army, it was time for Wuma Jun to show up. The strange mother and son were full of fantasies about the future. It was as if they could wear a royal robe and sit on the throne in the next moment. Unfortunately, "Oh, you really have 9 lives. I broke your neck last time, but you didn't die. Now you're alive again." A cynical voice came from outside the door. Wuma Jun and the woman in red were shocked. Their expressions changed. They looked in the direction of the voice. When they saw who it was, their expressions changed again. Lanting. Wuma Jun looked at Jiang Pingji in surprise. He almost couldn't recognize her. "Are you really Lanting?" He and Jiang Pingji hadn't seen each other for years. He almost couldn't recognize the young general in red and silver armor as Lu Shi. "Your Highness, long time no see." Jiang Pingji spoke to Wuma Jun, but her mental strength was locked on the woman in red. She didn't dare to act rashly. "You're my brother-in-law. We're family. Don't be so polite." "Lanting, you don't have to be so polite." Wuma Jun's intuition told him that Jiang Pingji didn't come with good intentions, but he didn't know why she was there. He couldn't afford to offend her. Therefore, he could only try to get to know Jiang Pingji and try to make her lower her guard. "Brother-in-law," Jiang Pingji laughed and said sarcastically, "I can't bear the title of brother-in-law, Your Highness." Wuma Jun was surprised. "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? You'll have to ask this wanton woman next to you what she did back then." Jiang Pingji smiled faintly. She stared at the woman in red. Her tone was cold and cruel. Wuma Jun looked at the woman in red. She claimed to be his biological mother. He believed her on the surface, but he was still suspicious. Why do you want to ask her? Jiang Pingji said. Your Highness, there's something you don't know. Do you know why Lu Huan suddenly had a hemorrhage? Rumor had it that Lu Gui had given birth to a pair of conjoined two-headed demon infants. After giving birth to the children, she passed away. But do you know why the child was deformed? Because how can a half-brother and half-sister have a normal child? Wuma Jun's eyes widened. He was so shocked that he took 2 steps back. He felt like he was listening to a book from heaven. No, even a book from heaven was not that ridiculous. Lu Huan was Lu Shi's concubine's daughter. How did she become his half-sister? His former wife, the woman who had a night of passion with him, the woman who was pregnant with his child, was actually his half-sister? Not only did they share the same mother, even their fathers were biological brothers. The image of Lu Huan's face and her protruding belly appeared in his mind. Suddenly he felt nauseous and vomited. Wuma Jun wasn't the only one who couldn't accept reality. The lady in red couldn't accept it either. Even if she was the one who did all these things, she would still fly into a rage out of humiliation when it was exposed so openly. She thought that Lu Shi didn't know about her plan, and the reason why she deliberately abandoned Lu Huan. She didn't expect Lu Shi to know from the beginning to the end. That man deliberately took advantage of her and played her. *TCH. The lady in red stared at Jiang Pengji with fear and hatred, as if she wanted to cut her into pieces with her gaze. Jiang Pengji sneered and raised her eyebrows slightly. She asked in return, *TH? You're scolding yourself, aren't you? You should reflect on yourself. Who's the *TCH? What do I have to reflect on? The lady in red panted heavily. Her eyebrows were hideous because of hatred and hatred, which more or less ruined her picturesque appearance. Jiang Pingji smiled and tore off the lady's only cover in front of Wuma Jun. She sneered. A lone soul possessed Wang Huijuan's body and harmed Xie Qian and his son. In order to enter the palace for glory and power, she had an unclear relationship with the 3 royal brothers and gave birth to Wuma Jun and Lu Huan. Another crime was to allow the siblings to have an illicit affair. When you were in Zhongzhou, you always paid attention to the situation in Dongqing. Isn't Takshu, the maidservant in my residence, your informant? Don't you know that Lu Huan and Wuma Jun are engaged? It's been 3 years since their engagement. Do you dare to say that you don't know? You clearly know that they are half-siblings, but you still watch them get married and have an illicit affair. Can you explain why? The live streaming room immediately exploded. What did they hear? Sister Takshu was the informant arranged by this time-traveling woman? Not only was Jiang Pengji's live streaming room in an uproar, but Wuma Jun felt that his worldview had been shattered into pieces. He finally stopped the urge to vomit. He no longer had the thought of being an emperor in his mind. There was only one question lingering in his mind. Why? Why did she watch the siblings have an illicit affair? She was their biological mother. The lady in red did not answer, but Jiang Pingji did. She smiled and said, I think you're indifferent because Lu Huan and Wuma Jun are no longer of any use to you, right? The lady in red wanted to ignore it. So what if she was the one who did it? She gave birth to Wuma Jun and Lu Huan, but she would leave this world sooner or later. There was no need to invest too much emotion in them. Was it wrong to do so? She felt justified in her heart, but she soon realized that it would not work. She saw that the bullet screen in her live streaming room was full of condemnations against her. The rich people who supported her even said that they would not come anymore. I thought you were just a whore. Now I realize that you are a vicious whore. Alright, I'm leaving. You can play around, but if you lose your life, I can't afford to play around. Sigh, although you are very good-looking, the Japanese ladies are not ugly. You are worse than them. Shameless lowly whore. The lady in red was furious. She was on the verge of losing control of her emotions. Yes, I was the one who did all these things. At least I dare to take responsibility for what I did. I'm better than those whore who pretended to be a whore. The lady in red pointed at Jiang Pengji and said, Don't think that you are so noble. Go back to your mother's grave and ask her how lowly she was. She stole her own brother-in-law and pushed her sister to Meng Zhan. Now, how did Meng Zhan treat Gu Zhen? She deserved to be avenged. According to the memory of the soul search, the lady in red firmly believed that Lu Shi and Gu Zhen were a couple. However, Jiang Pingji was not so sure about this. If in the original history, Lu Shi and Gu Zhen had given birth to Lu Shi, then how could Wei Xi recognize her at first glance? Lu Shi was Lu Shi and Gu Min's daughter. Could different mothers and the same man give birth to the same daughter? There was no need to think about this. Chapter 738. When had their streamer ever been insulted like that? Jiang Pingji, the person involved, had yet to explode, but the live streaming room was already in an uproar. Hui Shoufang's Huisheng. Bring me my 40-meter machete. I'll chop this B***tch. Love the night. Is this person tired of living? How dare she scold the streamer? I'll slap this son of a bitch to death. Lao Siji Lianmeng. Maybe she's tired of living. After all, the streamer has already killed her once. Emolanji. A woman with a golden finger is willful. I feel sorry for my streamer. She's just a salted fish who knows how to live stream. Qingfeng Shuiying. Ha ha ha, the person above, are you sure? The streamer is a salted fish who causes trouble everywhere. How many people are called daddy by her? Jiang Pingji tilted her head and raised her hand to pick her ear. She didn't seem angry at all. What a joke. If this level of trash abuse could make her mentally unbalanced, she wouldn't have lived until now. As a general, mentality was very important. Therefore, Jiang Pingji was still in the mood to probe the woman in red's words. Jiang Pingji rubbed her chin with interest. Her jade-like eyes were like deep pools of water. You just said, she deserves to be avenged. Does this she refer to my mother, Gu Min, or my stepmother, Gu Zhen? Or is it both? The woman in red sneered. Isn't it all the same? Yes, it's all the same, Jiang Pingji said. If that's the case, tell me, what did you do? The woman in red pressed her lips together tightly and didn't say a word. Jiang Pingji continued. My father said that Meng Zhan was still a gentleman. When he married my stepmother, he repeatedly promised that he would treat her well. But after a few years of marriage, Meng Zhan's words and actions completely violated his initial promise. I don't doubt my father's judgment. He and Meng Zhan were classmates and best friends. There was no conflict of interest between them. Meng Zhan didn't have to deceive him. So what did you do? The woman in red didn't expect Jiang Pingji to be so sharp. She felt a vague sense of guilt and excitement. She regarded Lu Shi and his wife as formidable opponents. They had fought many times. That was one of the few times she won. She smiled proudly. Gu Min's bridal chamber didn't bleed. In order for her to gain a firm footing in her maiden home, I sent her a gift secretly, so that she could give birth in one night. Jiang Pingji's face turned cold. And then, on the night before Gu Zhen's wedding, she was ambushed by a small group of bandits on the way to the wedding. In the end, it was a close shave, but there were rumors that Gu Zhen had lost her virginity to the bandits. The wedding was just around the corner, so it was impossible for it to fail. You also know that men care a lot about things like falling red. There was no red on the wedding night. Meng Zhan wanted to endure it, but Gu Zhen got pregnant on the first night of the wedding. So, who does this child belong to? There was no paternity test in this era. And the unreliable blood test was still bullshit. Meng Zhan had always felt that he was under a cloud. It was hard for him to talk about it. He wanted to find a chance for Gu Zhen to beat the child, and then let the matter go. In the end, Gu Zhen insisted on keeping the child, which became the first knot between the couple. Jiang Pingji laughed. Did you also do something to my stepmother's second child? The lady in red said. Meng Zhan has seen Gu Zhen fooling around with the servants in the manor. How could he not hate her? A stepmother would never do such a thing. The woman in red smiled sweetly. The appearance-changing pill is a good thing. Jiang Pingji's smile turned cold. You are indeed ruthless. You used such a shameful and unpresentable trick very well. So what if it's not presentable? Didn't your mother, who was like a white lotus, also fall? The woman in red sneered. If you didn't really hate my mother, I would have thought that you had forbidden feelings for her. Jiang Pingji sighed and asked one last question. One last question. Were you the one who hurt my mother 14 years ago? Did you almost kill her? The woman in red was about to answer, but she suddenly held back. I won't say. Jiang Pingji laughed. I know the answer even if you don't say it. It's rare to see someone as stupid as you in the world. The woman in red's anger that had just been extinguished burned again. She secretly squeezed the grade 9 loyalty talisman. The system secretly stopped her from doing anything. Host, now is not a good time to make a move. You are also not her opponent. Lu Shi's spirit is very strong. You must wait until she is defenseless, or when she is seriously ill and weak. Only then will the success rate be 100%. She is still at her peak. The success rate of the grade 9 loyalty talisman is much lower than normal. Don't take the risk. Retreat first. As long as there is life, there is hope. The system also hated Jiang Pingji to the core, but it could not do anything to her. The woman in red finally regained some of her rationality. She swallowed her anger unwillingly and planned to secretly crush the deity's 1,000 miles talisman to escape. Jiang Pingji's spirit was very strong. How could she miss her little trick? The woman in red had just crushed the deity's 1,000 miles talisman when Jiang Pingji, who was a few meters away, suddenly appeared behind her. In the next moment, she felt a sharp pain in her neck. The sound of bones breaking reached her eardrums. Since you've revealed so much, I'll give you another chance to turn things around. See you next time. Jiang Pingji respectfully sent the woman in red off with a smile. She seemed very happy on the surface, but her heart was gloomy. She had done so many wrong things. Killing her once would be too easy. It would be better to keep her alive and play with her slowly. Seeing Jiang Pingji kill people, and the woman in red disappear without a trace, Wu Majun was so scared that he knelt on the ground. Both of them were monsters. When Jiang Pingji's gaze fell on him, Wu Majun was so scared that he crawled on all fours. He wanted to leave this place. As long as he could live, he was willing to do anything. Why are you running? Before Wu Majun could crawl 2 steps, he felt a strong impact on his waist. Jiang Pingji stepped on him. Lanting, don't kill me because of our past relationship. Lu Huan is not your biological sister, but we are siblings. Wu Majun was so scared that his limbs felt weak. His lower abdomen loosened, and a warm orange-yellow liquid flowed out. Snot and tears flowed down his face. Seeing this, Jiang Pingji mocked him. Emotions are useless to me. Why don't you talk about benefits? Wu Majun was inspired. He quickly said, Lanting, tell me what you want. I will give you half of the country as long as you let me go. Jiang Pingji smiled. If you want to talk about benefits, you deserve to die. Your Highness, who asked you not to be a 3-year-old? If he was a 3-year-old, she might have spared his life. Hearing this, Wu Majun knew that Lu Shi would not let him go. Lu Shi, you will die. Wu Majun was lying on the ground. Just as he was about to curse, a foot stepped on the back of his head and pushed him into the ground. Noisy. The foot exerted force, and his head split open. Yellow, green, red, and white matter splattered all over the ground. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.